Chapter 755. Take it back. Yili raised her brows. Mo Jingli really knew how to indulge in the wildest of fantasies. In order to take down Changxing City, the Mahist army had forcefully broken through the northern tribes' blockade on their way to reinforce Changxing City. How many people had died in battle? How could Mo Jingli let him take it back with just a few words? The Prince Ding mansion was not a charity and Mo Xiuyao was not a saint. Mo Xiuyao lazily rested his chin on her shoulder and sneered, so what if I return it to him? Can he defend it? Yili also smiled. Currently, all of the Dechu state's military forces were in Jiangnan and the north of Jiangnan had long been occupied by various powers. Not to mention that they would not return Chu capital, even if Mo Xiuyao really did return Chu capital, Mo Jingli might not dare to accept it. If he accepted it, he would have to send troops to stop it and send officials to manage it. All of this could be ignored. If Chu capital were to fall into the hands of the northern tribes or the northern tribes again, Mo Jingli's reputation would be thrown to the ground and trampled on. Then what is he here for? Yili did not understand. He has nothing better to do, so he came to make a fuss. Did he make things difficult for Li in the garden just now? Mo Xiuyao intimately rubbed Yili's hair and asked softly. Yili smiled faintly and said, how could he make things difficult for me? Mo Xiuyao smiled and said, that may not be so. When he sees that we are living so well, he will naturally be envious and jealous. He might even think that you are helping me because you want to take revenge on him. Yili was speechless. Mo Jingli really did think that way. Lifting her head, Yili held Mo Xiuyao's handsome face in her hands and said seriously, don't make trouble and guess the thoughts of an idiot. It will be contagious. Mo Xiuyao blinked and instantly understood what Yili meant. He couldn't help but laugh out loud. When he wasn't done laughing, he pulled Yili into his arms and planted a few heavy kisses on her pink lips before continuing to laugh wildly. Seeing him laugh so happily, Yili had no choice but to let him be. She leaned into Mo Xiuyao's arms and told him what she had said to Princess Anxi. Mo Xiuyao played with her slender hand as he said in a low voice, Nanzhao doesn't have any conflict with us for now. There is nothing wrong with helping her in secret. If the Emperor of Xiling can really deal with Enchanting, it will save us a lot of trouble. Do you really think the Emperor of Xiling can deal with Enchanting? Yili asked. He can't. Mo Xiuyao denied without hesitation. The Emperor of Xiling may have some cleverness, but he was not on the same level as Enchanting. As long as they can cause trouble for Enchanting earlier. What we need to consider now is, the northern tribes. When the northern tribes were mentioned, a trace of anger flashed across Mo Xiuyao's calm eyes. The hatred between the northern tribes and the Mahist army or Mo Xiuyao was definitely greater than all the other countries combined. That year, Mo Xiuyan had died at the hands of the northern tribes. The worst defeat of the Mahist army in 200 years had also been at the hands of the northern tribes. Mo Xiuyao's 7 to 8 years of suffering and humiliation were mostly due to the northern tribes. Now that the Mahist army had recovered, it was time for the northern tribes to face their revenge. Furthermore, the northern tribes had committed countless crimes in Dechu state last year. Mo Xiuyao would definitely not let them off. Leaning in Mo Xiuyao's arms, Yili frowned slightly. Yelu Hong and Yelu Yi will arrive tomorrow morning at the latest. How do you plan to settle them down? Mo Xiuyao smiled faintly, this is grandfather's birthday. I don't plan to deal with them now. Let's just do the same as the others. Our Li city is small. Yelu Hong and Yelu Yi can live together. Yili smiled. Yelu Hong and Yelu Yi had always been at odds. They had been fighting openly and covertly for more than 10 years without a clear winner. Living together would allow them to restrain each other. No one would be able to cause any trouble in Li City. I should also meet Princess Ronghua. Yili thought for a while. She had buried a chess piece for so many years. She had to see if it could still be used. It would be a pity if there were any accidents. No matter what Yili did, Mo Xiuyao was very assured. Although Princess Ronghua used to be arrogant and domineering, it was said that her methods were not bad. However, there was another person who made Mo Xiuyao frown slightly. Is there really no problem with that Yi Ying? Mo Xiuyao did not have the slightest good impression of Yi Ying. Other than her good looks, she was not good at anything else. This kind of woman's temperament was even more capricious. Not to mention letting her do anything, even being the matriarch of the household would be a favor to her. Compared to a woman like Yi Ying, Mo Xiuyao felt that Yaoji, who came from a brothel, was more reliable. Even Princess Ronghua, who was spoiled and domineering since childhood, was more reliable than her. Yili smiled faintly. As long as Prince can help her find her son, she will be very reliable. Moreover, Prince, do not underestimate women, especially a delicate woman like Yi Ying. The more delicate a woman looks on the outside, the more ruthless she is. On the contrary, those who appeared to be overbearing were often unable to accomplish anything because such people would easily cause others to be on guard against them. Mo Xiuyao nodded and said, as long as Li knows. Mo Jingli's son, Xiuyao really doesn't know anything about it? Yili asked curiously. Mo Xiuyao said, originally, I was not interested. Since Li needs it, I will send someone to check it out. But, according to Mo Jingqi's usual behavior, I'm afraid this child. How? Far away on the horizon, close at hand. But if you give Mo Jingli 100 years, he may not be able to guess it. Mo Xiuyao laughed. The thought flashed through Yili's mind, but she did not have time to catch it. But Yili felt that she might have a clue. Mo Xiuyao casually played with Yili's soft hair. Does Li really intend to help Ying find the child and return it to her? Ying is not suitable for someone who knows how to repay kindness. Yili smiled and said, I naturally know this, and I don't intend to return the child immediately after finding it. But since I promised her, I have to look for it. Moreover, this child is also very important to Mo Jingli. It was not easy to snatch the throne, but there was no son to inherit it. The sense of achievement of snatching the throne would be reduced countless times in an instant. Chapter 756. Yili and Mo Xiuyao had a rare moment of leisure to chat in the study. Outside the door, Chief Steward Mo hurried in to report, Prince, Wang Fei, Li Wang is fighting with someone in the front yard. Hearing this, a trace of irritation flashed through Mo Xiuyao's eyes. He frowned and said, are the guards of the Prince Ding mansion all freeloaders? Come with I and throw them out. No need to give face. Chief Steward Mo hesitated and then said, but, the person fighting with Li Wang is Nanzhao's Wang Fu. Yili stood and said to Mo Xiuyao with a smile, how can these two people fight? Since they are guests, let's go take a look. Since Yili had said so, no matter how unwilling Mo Xiuyao was, he could only go with Yili to the front yard with a sullen face. The location of the fight was in the front yard of the Prince Ding mansion. The front yard of the Prince Ding mansion was decorated very generously and simply. A huge screen wall with 9 dragons soaring in the sky separated the front and back of the yard. It made people see the 9 lifelike flying dragons as soon as they entered. It was so imposing that people couldn't help but feel intimidated. Behind the screen wall was the main hall at the front of the main axis of Ding Wang Fu. Outside the hall, the figures of 2 men were fighting. The worst part was that they were not sparring with each other in martial arts. Instead, they were just like ordinary people, throwing punches and kicks at each other. It was impossible to tell that one was the regent prince of the Dechu state and the other was Nanzhao's Wang Fu. Not far away, Princess Anxi, Princess Xixia and Ying stood to the side and watched. 2 guards in black stood in front of Princess Anxi, in case the 2 men accidentally came to them and hurt the pregnant Princess Anxi. Unlike the anxious faces of Yi Ying and Princess Xixia, Princess Anxi's expression was very calm, as if she was not worried that her husband would lose or get hurt. When Princess Xixia saw Pu, a punch mercilessly on Mo Jingli's face, she was so distressed that she burst into tears. She grabbed Princess Anqi's sleeve and said, "Sister, tell him to stop. He injured Prince." Princess Anqi glanced at her sister indifferently. She raised a hand and gently pulled away her sister's hand that was tugging at her sleeve. She frowned and said, "What's a little injury to a man? As for you, Xixia, after fighting for so many years, I originally thought that you would have learned many of the rules of the Dechu state, but now it seems that you are not as good as when you were in Nanzhao." Princess Xixia said anxiously, but, royal sister." Princess Anqi's face darkened and she said, "You have been removed from the Nanzhao royal family. I am not your royal sister." Princess Anqi hated Mo Jingli more than anyone else. When Mo Jingli and Shu Manlin hooked up with each other, they had caused her a lot of trouble. Even her own sister had followed them to oppose her. Princess Anqi would never forget how difficult the situation was at that time. If it wasn't for Su Qingqian's secret help, he would have been killed by these people. When she saw that Princess Xixia had dragged her into this for Mo Jingli, Princess Anqi's face turned even uglier. Her hatred for Mo Jingli deepened. "Royal sister, how can you do this?" Princess Xixia glared at Princess Anqi with red eyes and said, "The throne is already yours. What are you still dissatisfied with? Why do you have to make trouble for Prince and me?" "Make trouble for you?" Princess Anqi sneered disdainfully. "Do I need to make trouble for I?" What did she mean by the throne was already hers? She had been bestowed the title of Crown Princess since she was a child. She also shouldered the responsibility of being the Crown Princess. When Xixia was having fun, she was holding a policy book and studying hard. When Xixia was dying for Mo Jingli, she stayed up all night to deal with Nanzhao's political affairs. Could it be that the throne of Nanzhao was given to her by Xixia? The guard of the Prince Ding mansion who was protecting Princess Anqi could not stand it anymore and said, "Miss, it was Prince Li who made trouble for Nanzhao's royal husband first." Princess Xixia choked. At the same time, she was very unhappy with the way the guard addressed her. She did not have a legitimate identity. Others called her princess for Mo Jingli's sake. But the people of the Prince Ding mansion did not give her face and only called her Miss. But no matter how beautiful Princess Xixia was, it could not change the fact that she was already 25 or 26 years old. It was not a compliment to be called Miss at this age. Even so, he should not have hit the prince. Princess Xixia gritted her teeth. The two guards looked at the sky, speechless. What did she mean by hit the prince? The two were clearly fighting each other. Don't make it sound like Prince Li was being abused. What's going on? The fighting and quarreling made the onlookers feel that young Master Qingqian's sudden voice was like heavenly music in winter. She turned around and saw young Master Qingqian, who was dressed in white, strolling towards her. Even though he was already over 30 years old, young Master Qingqian still looked like he did 7 or 8 years ago. Even the years of hard work did not diminish his elegance. His handsome face carried a faint puzzled smile, causing the hearts of the 3 women present to skip a beat. Princess Xixia awkwardly shut her mouth. Even though she was deeply in love with Mo Jingli, as long as she was a woman, she would never be willing to be rude in front of such a peerless man. Princess Anqi's eyes were dazed and nostalgic for a moment, but she quickly calmed down. She nodded at Su Qingqian with a smile. "Qingqian, long time no see." Su Qingqian looked at Princess Anqi and his gaze fell on her slightly protruding belly. A trace of gratification flashed across his eyes. He smiled. "Long time no see. Looks like the princess is doing well. Congratulations." Su Qingqian had been busy these days. Although Princess Anqi had arrived yesterday, he did not have time to meet her. He did not expect to see such a scene as soon as he returned to the residence. Su Qingqian raised his eyebrows in confusion and looked at the people fighting in front of him. Princess Anqi smiled embarrassedly and briefly told Su Qingqian what had happened. It turned out that after Princess Anqi left the residence, she discovered that she had left a sachet in the Prince Ding mansion. This was not an important matter, but the sachet contained a token from the Nanzhao king. So she returned to the Prince Ding mansion with her husband to look for it. As soon as they entered the courtyard, they ran into Mo Jingli, who was charging over angrily. Mo Jingli was so focused on walking forward that he almost bumped into the pregnant Princess Anxi. Mo Jingli should have just apologized, but Mo Jingli was in a bad mood. Not only did he not apologize, he even scolded Princess Anxi, mocking her for running around with a big belly. Princess Anxi was not someone to be bullied. She also mercilessly mocked him for being childless, for being jealous of other people's children. Who knew that this would hit Mo Jingli where it hurt? Mo Jingli's face darkened and he was about to hit Princess Anxi. As her husband, Pu, naturally would not allow anyone to bully his wife. So the two of them started fighting in the Prince Ding mansion. After fighting for a while, Princess Anxi's anger gradually subsided. She signaled Pu, to stop fighting in Nanjiang dialect. Hearing Princess Anxi's words, Pu, immediately stopped and rolled to the side. Seeing that he had stopped, Mo Jingli did not pester him anymore. He stood up and wiped the blood from his lips. Chapter 757. When Yi Li and Mo Xiuyao arrived, they saw that the two of them had stopped fighting and were glaring at each other. There were many scars on their faces. Pua's face was swollen. Mo Jingli's lips were bleeding and one of his eyes was bruised. Seeing this, everyone present was speechless again. Yi Li stood beside Mo Xiuyao and laughed inwardly. Over the years, she had gotten used to the gentle and refined way of speaking. A gentleman would use his mouth and not his fists. A martial artist would naturally use martial arts to determine victory. Even an ordinary soldier in the military camp would not think of fighting like an ordinary villager. Now that she suddenly saw Mo Jingli's appearance, she could not help but laugh in her heart. Prince Ding, Princess Consort, I'm sorry. Pu Ah came forward and apologized to Mo Xiuyao and Yi Li in the stiff Dechu state language. Mo Xiuyao smiled faintly and said, "It doesn't matter. Is Nanzhao's husband hurt?" Pu Ah shook his head and stood beside Princess Anxi. Princess Anxi looked at his swollen cheek and took out a handkerchief to wipe the dust on his face. She said to Yi Li and Mo Xiuyao, "We were rude. Prince Ding and Princess Consort, please forgive us." Yi Li and Mo Xiuyao had heard from Director Mo on the way here. Naturally, they would not blame Pu Ah. Yi Li smiled faintly and said, "It's our fault that the queen almost got hurt in the Prince Ding mansion." Princess Xixia and Ying also gathered around Mo Jingli and wiped his face and asked about his well-being. Mo Jingli glanced at the harmonious atmosphere on Princess Anxi's side. He impatiently pushed away Princess Anxi and Ying, who were wiping his face, and turned to leave in a huff. Princess Xixia was stunned. She looked back at Princess Anxi, stomped her foot, and hurriedly chased after her. Ying was left staring blankly at Mo Jingli's back as he walked away. Her lips curled into a bitter smile. He nodded at Yi Li and the others before turning to leave. After Mo Jingli left, Princess Anxi asked, "Who provoked him?" Yi Li smiled and said, "For a person like Li Wang, even if no one provokes him, he will still get angry for no reason. Are you all right? Do you need to see a doctor?" Princess Anxi shook her head and said, "I don't feel anything. He just pushed me. I'm not hurt." Yi Li was relieved. She nodded and smiled, "That's good." Princess Anxi looked at the door thoughtfully. After thinking for a while, he said to Yi Li, "You guys should be careful. I think that Prince Li's temper might cause some trouble." Yi Li naturally appreciated Princess Anxi's reminder and thanked her again. She also invited Princess Anxi and her husband to stay for lunch before returning. In the Li City, Dechu State Post House, Yi Ying walked into the main hall and saw Mo Jingli sitting there drinking tea. She could tell from his expression that he was in a very bad mood. After all these years, Yi Ying was no longer the naive girl with a beautiful dream. Naturally, she did not want to get close to him at this time. Her past experience told her that if she got close to him now, she would only become Mo Jingli's punching bag. After pausing for a moment, Yi Ying wanted to turn around and leave. "Where are you going?" Mo Jingli's cold voice sounded behind her. Yi Ying was startled. She looked at him and said, "I'm going back to my room to rest." "Why did you come back so late?" Mo Jingli asked. Yi Ying could not help but smile bitterly. Mo Jingli left angrily in front of her. Princess Xixia walked in front of her and chased after him. By the time she left the door a step later, the entire Li Palace's entourage had already left. In the end, she could only stroll back by herself. It was rare for the dignified princess consort Li to be ignored to this extent. "I was taking a walk outside and came back a bit late," Yi Ying said indifferently. When Mo Jingli asked this, he had already remembered what had happened. Just looking at the pitiful Yi Ying in front of him was like a constant reminder of what he had lost. Especially when he had just seen Yi Li and was mercilessly mocked by her. There were countless times in the past when Mo Jingli always thought that if he had not been with Yi Li, if he had married Yi Ying, would everything have been different? He did not know when it started, but every time he saw Yi Li and Mo Xiuyao standing together and smiling, Mo Jingli felt as if a poisonous snake was biting his heart. After a moment of silence, Mo Jingli looked at Yi Ying and asked, "A few days ago, Yi Li pulled you out to talk alone. What did you talk about?" Yi Ying's heart turned cold. She looked down and said indifferently, "Nothing much. Princess Ding said that grandfather and father are in Glass City. She asked me to visit them when I have time. That's all." Mo Jingli frowned unhappily. Yi Ying nodded, "That's all. My relationship with Princess Ding is not good. There's nothing to talk about." "Is that so?" Mo Jingli pondered for a moment and said, "If that's the case, you should go back and take a look." Yi Ying nodded silently and said, "I understand. I'll go back to my room to rest." After Yi Ying left, Princess Xixia came out and sat down beside Mo Xiuyao. She asked, "Prince, do you really believe what she said?" Mo Xiuyao looked at her sideways and said indifferently, "What do you mean?" Princess Xixia was shocked. She quickly smiled and said, "What do I mean? I just thought that she and Princess Ding talked for a long time that day. How could they only talk about the Yi family?" Mo Jingli snorted and said, "No matter what she said to Yi Li, she can't escape from I." Mo Jingli was well aware of Yi Ying's capabilities. He had never thought that Yi Ying had any ability to pose a threat to him. Glancing indifferently at Princess Xixia, Mo Jingli said, "You should know your place. Don't provoke her. In the end, she is still the Di Fei of the Li Palace and Yi Li's younger sister. I need to give some face to Yi Li." The smile on Princess Xixia's face froze. She suppressed the hatred she felt for Yi Li and said with a smile, "I know. I've followed you for so many years without any title or status. Have I said anything?" Mo Jingli nodded in satisfaction and said, "That's good. Don't worry. In the future, I will not treat you unfairly." Princess Xixia squeezed out a smile and said, "I know that Prince treats me the best." Obediently leaning into Mo Jingli's arms, Princess Xixia's beautiful face had long been twisted. Her originally bright and beautiful eyes were now filled with hatred. For Mo Jingli, she had given up her status as a princess and followed him for 10 years without any title or status. It was impossible to say that she had never regretted it. She was no longer the princess of Nanzhao who had chased after Mo Jingli all the way to the Chu state. But what was the use of regret? She had already been removed from the Nanzhao imperial house. Even if she returned to Nanzhao, she would be despised and despised by her subjects. She could only follow Mo Jingli. But Mo Jingli, for one Yi Li, had used all kinds of reasons to delay the removal of Yi Ying's position as Wang Fei. "Brother Jingli, how can you treat me like this?" Mo Jingli, who was also holding Princess Xixia, was also absent-minded. As he carelessly played with Princess Xixia's hair, he was deep in thought. He remembered, he still had a chess piece that he hadn't used. Chapter 758. However, regardless of what the people in the inn were thinking, the entire glass city was filled with song and dance. The next morning, the last group of guests arrived at the entrance of the Prince Ding mansion. It was still Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao who personally came out to welcome them. Seeing the group of people dressed in northern tribes' uniforms that were completely different from those of the Central Plains, Mo Jingli's lips curled into a cold smile. Prince Ding, Princess Ding, it's been many years since we last met. It's an honor to meet you. The crown prince of the northern tribes, Yelu Hong, stepped forward and greeted them with a smile. On the other hand, Yelu Ye's expression was cold and stern, with a hint of arrogance and enmity. The northern tribes' army was still in a standoff with the Mahist army in the north. Yelu Yi was the commander of the northern tribes' army, so he naturally wouldn't treat Mo Xiaoyao nicely. Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly and said, "Crown Prince is too polite. Your Highness is even more dignified now." Yelu Hong looked enviously at Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li. He sighed and said, "I'm not as youthful as Prince and Princess Consort." The people of the northern tribes tended to age easily. When they met a few years ago, their ages didn't seem too different. But now, 6 or 7 years had passed. The crown prince of the northern tribes had grown a short beard. Even his figure wasn't as tall and slender as before. But Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li still looked like they were in their early 20s. When the two of them stood together, they looked like a celestial couple. How could anyone not be envious? Crown Prince is too kind. Yi Li smiled faintly. Seeing Su Hongyan who came back with them, a sincere smile appeared on her face. Second uncle is finally back. It must have been a tiring journey. How was the journey? Compared to the Central Plains, the northern tribes had it tough. Even though Su Hongyan had only been there for a few months, he had lost a lot of weight. Su Hongyan looked at Yi Li and said with a smile, "Everything is fine. Uncle didn't have time to rush back when Li gave birth." "How are the two children?" Yi Li smiled and said, "I've made Uncle worry." "They're all very well." Mo Xiaoyao held Yi Li's hand and smiled, "Li, why don't we invite the crown prince of the northern tribes and the 7th prince into our residence for a cup of tea before we chat? Uncle must be tired from the journey back, why don't we rest first?" Yi Li nodded apologetically. "Crown Prince Yelu, 7th prince, please come in." Yelu Hong smiled and nodded. When Yelu Yi walked past Yi Li, he gave him a condescending glance, as if he hated Yi Li very much. This expression made Yi Li raise her eyebrows curiously. Although her relationship with Yelu Yi had never been good, Yelu Yi had never shown such obvious disgust towards her. It should be said that no one had ever shown such obvious disgust in front of Yi Li. This made her curious. Once they entered the residence, Su Hongyan went to freshen up and rest. Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li brought the guests to the main hall and sat down to drink tea. Yi Li's gaze fell on the veiled woman sitting next to Yelu Yi. She ignored the crown princess of the northern tribes, Princess Ronghua. As if noticing Yi Li's gaze, Yelu Yi glared fiercely at Yi Li, his expression somewhat unfriendly. Yelu Hong who was sitting opposite him frowned slightly, as if he was dissatisfied with his younger brother's behavior. Mo Xiaoyao leaned back in his chair, carelessly supporting Yi Li's waist with one hand, and looked indifferently at the people in front of him. Yi Li put down the teacup, nodded to Princess Ronghua, and asked with a smile, "It has been almost 10 years since we parted in the Chu capital. Is the princess doing well in the northern tribes?" Princess Ronghua's smile was appropriate. Compared to the time in the Chu capital, she had more of the grandeur of the Great Wall, but did not lose the dignity of the Central Plains imperial family. "Thank you for your concern, Princess. I am doing well in the northern tribes. His Highness is also very good to me." Then, she looked up and smiled at Yelu Hong. Yelu Hong also smiled back. It seemed that the relationship between husband and wife was not affected much by the northern tribe's attack on the Dechu state. "That's good." Yi Li smiled and looked sideways at the veiled woman beside Yelu Yi. She raised her eyebrows and said, "Seventh prince, is this the seventh imperial concubine?" Yelu Yi nodded and said, "Yes, this is Ai's beloved concubine, Qing Yaina." Yi Li smiled and said, "If I remember correctly, Qing Yaina means the most beautiful woman in the language of the northern tribes. I'm sure Princess Qi must be a stunning beauty." Yelu Yi did not deny it and nodded, "Yes, Ai's beloved concubine is indeed a rare beauty." She turned sideways and held the seventh princess consort's hand. Her eyes were filled with gentleness and love, as if she wanted to compete with Yi Li and Mo Xiuyao in terms of love. However, Yelu Yi had always thought highly of himself. A woman who could subdue him like this, her appearance definitely wouldn't be too bad. Yi Li did not care about the provocation in Yelu Ye's words. She smiled and said, "It's a pity that I can't see the seventh imperial concubine's beauty." On the other side, Princess Ronghua smiled faintly and said, "Princess doesn't need to be regretful. The seventh imperial concubine is indeed a stunning beauty, but the Dechu state has never lacked stunning beauties. When Princess was still in the Chu capital, didn't you see many stunning beauties?" Yi Li's eyes flashed and her gaze swept over the woman in white. She smiled and said, "Princess is right. Not to mention others, just the stunning beauties in the Chu capital written by young Master Ming Yu, any one of them is enough to cause the downfall of a country. It's a pity. Never mind, this concubine and prince did not know about the seventh prince's wedding. When we return, we must ask the seventh prince for a toast." Yelu Hong smiled and said, "Princess doesn't need to worry. It's not too late to have a toast. When seventh brother and sister-in-law get married, it won't be too late for Princess to ask." The implication was that Yelu Yi and this woman were not married yet. This woman was not the rightful seventh imperial concubine. With so much information, Yi Li also had a low opinion of the woman in front of her. She lowered her eyebrows and smiled faintly, "If that's the case, I must congratulate the seventh prince in advance. I also hope that the seventh prince will not be stingy with a cup of wine." Yelu Yi looked at Yi Li for a long time and then said, "When the time comes, I will definitely invite Prince Ding and Princess to come. I also hope that the two of you will not dislike it." Yi Li turned and smiled at Mo Xiuyao, "Prince, the seventh prince has invited us to attend his wedding. Does Prince want to go or not?" Mo Xiuyao lowered his head and looked at Yi Li with gentle eyes. He said softly, "If Miss Li says to go, then go. If she says not to go, then don't go." Yi Li smiled with satisfaction. She looked up and saw a trace of resentment in the beautiful eyes under the white veil. Chapter 759. Looking at the white-clothed woman in front of her, the smile in Yi Li's eyes deepened, but if one looked carefully, there was a hint of coldness in her smile. Looking at the person beside Yelu Yi with a faint smile, Yi Li said, "Speaking of which, I feel that the seventh princess consort is very familiar. Crown Princess, what do you think?" Princess Ronghua covered her mouth and smiled, glancing at the woman opposite her with a faint smile. "Isn't that so? When we first met, she scared me. I thought. Sister-in-law." Yelu Ye's expression changed slightly, and he stiffly interrupted Princess Ronghua. Princess Ronghua didn't argue with him. For many things, as long as everyone understood the meaning, it was fine. It didn't need to be said directly. After listening to Yi Li and Princess Ronghua's words, Mo Xiuyao turned his eyes to the woman beside Yelu Yi and frowned slightly. Yi Li reached out to hold his hand and said with a faint smile, "Prince, do you also feel that the seventh princess consort is somewhat familiar?" Mo Xiuyao looked at her indifferently and said, "I don't have any impression." Although the answer was contrary to Yi Li and Princess Ronghua's meaning, the smile on Yi Li's face became more pleasant. After all, no woman liked her husband to remember another woman's appearance, even if it was out of disgust. Mo Xiuyao could also see that Yi Li's mood seemed to be very good, and his frowning brows gradually relaxed. Qing Yaina, who was sitting below, changed her expression because of Mo Xiuyao's few words. If she wasn't wearing a veil, everyone present would be frightened by her ferocious expression. His half-drooping eyes flashed with a vicious light. Although she didn't have a good relationship with the northern tribes, she was still a guest of the Prince Ding mansion. After exchanging a few words with Yelu Hong and Yelu Yi, Yili got up and led Princess Ronghua and Qing Yaina to another place to talk. After all, it would be boring for the two women to listen to what the men wanted to talk about. Moreover, with the relationship between Yili and Princess Ronghua, it was reasonable for them to talk in private. However, the fact that they were followed by a silent and unapproachable future 7th imperial concubine made people feel a little uncomfortable. Princess Ronghua obviously did not have a good impression of her future sister-in-law. Qing Yaina, I have something to say to Princess Ding. Is it difficult for you to leave? Princess Ronghua was still as domineering and arrogant as when she was in the Chu capital. She didn't care about the woman she didn't like and asked her to leave. Qing Yaina looked at her coldly. Although there was displeasure in her eyes, she obviously did not want to have a conflict with Princess Ronghua. Yili smiled and said, it just so happens that I haven't seen the princess for many years. The flower garden of the Prince Ding mansion is barely acceptable. Miss, please go to the garden first. Please forgive me if I'm rude. After that, she raised her hand to summon Qing Shuang and Ah Jin, who had just returned a few days ago, and said, accompany the guest for a walk in the garden. Qing Shuang had been trained to be clever and clever over the years. When she heard Yili's words, she smiled and said, yes, Mississippi. This way please. Although she was in her 20s, Ah Jin was still as silent as before. She just glanced at Qing Yaina lightly and stood silently behind Qing Shuang. Qing Yaina's eyes swept over Yili. In the end, she didn't say anything and turned away. After driving away the eyesore, Princess Ronghua showed a relaxed smile and said, she's finally gone. She's like a ghost, which makes people feel uncomfortable. The two strolled in the garden. Yili asked softly, is that really? Princess Ronghua nodded and said, isn't it? When I first met her, I thought I recognized her wrongly. It was just a person with a similar face. But look at her expression and attitude. How many women in the world are as annoying as her? As she said that, she curled her lips in disgust. She had completely forgotten how arrogant she was back in the Chu capital. She was no less arrogant than that person. It's just that I didn't expect her to escape. I don't even know how she managed to hook up with Yelu Yi. This, she was naturally referring to noble consort Lu, who had escaped from the palace and disappeared. Yili also didn't expect that noble consort Lu would become the future princess consort of the 7th prince of the northern tribes. Princess Ronghua originally didn't have any feelings for noble consort Lu. However, no matter how much she hated Mo Jingqi for marrying her to the northern tribes, she was still a member of the royal family of the Dechu state. She was Mo Jingqi's cousin. Seeing that noble consort Lu had faked her death and escaped after Mo Jingqi's death and hooked up with Yelu Yi, her husband's political enemy, how could Princess Ronghua like her? Don't be fooled by her arrogant face. Her ability to hook up with men is really bad. Not only is Yelu Yi dead set on her, but even the king of the northern tribes praises her. Princess Ronghua was also angry when she mentioned this. Yelu Hong and Yelu Yi were the two most valued sons of the king of the northern tribes. The king of the northern tribes liked Qing Yaina, so naturally he would value Yelu Yi more. This was naturally disadvantageous to Yelu Hong. Yili smiled and looked at her angry little face. It seems that the princess has a good relationship with the crown prince of the northern tribes these years. Princess Ronghua's face turned red and she glared at Yili with hatred. She snappily said, "You are teasing me. Who doesn't know that Ding Wang and Ding Wang Fei are the celestial couple that everyone in the world envies?" Yili smiled and said, "You can tease me too. I have a good relationship with Mo Xiuyao. Are you jealous?" Princess Ronghua was so angry that her heart was blocked. "I also have a good relationship with the crown prince." Yili looked calm and looked at Princess Ronghua with a faint smile. The smile on Princess Ronghua's face gradually faded. She looked at Yi Li and said, "You don't have to worry. I promised you and Prince Ding. I will not go back on my word." Yi Li said softly, "As far as I know, the princess and the crown prince of the northern tribes already have 2 children. Can the princess really do it? If there are any difficulties, I hope that princess can bring it up first and not cause any trouble when we arrive. I believe that princess will understand what I mean. Now if there was any difficulty, it could be discussed. If Princess Ronghua went back on her word and caused the Prince Ding mansion to suffer any losses, then the Prince Ding mansion would not be polite." Princess Ronghua took a deep breath and said in a low voice, "Princess, please rest assured. I am the princess of the Dechu state. Even if the Dechu state is now. Although I have a good relationship with the crown prince, but, if the crown prince succeeds the throne in the future, my children will never be the crown prince's heir." The people of the Central Plains looked down on the barbarians beyond the Great Wall, but the tribes beyond the Great Wall did not necessarily look down on the people of the Central Plains. The royal family of the northern tribes' rejection of foreign blood could be said to be almost pathological. No matter how good her children were, they could never be the king of the northern tribes. Therefore, even if Yelu Hong was good to her, he also married a lot of concubines and even valued the children of the women of the northern tribes more. As a member of the royal family, Princess Ronghua was very clear about the saying, "When beauty fades, love relaxes." Since ancient times, there had been a saying that love was broken before the beauty was old. In the future, when Yelu Hong no longer had feelings for her, the Prince Ding mansion would be the biggest support for her and her children. Chapter 760. Yi Li calmly looked at Princess Ronghua for a long time, and finally nodded, "I believe in the princess. In fact, the princess doesn't have to worry now. The Prince Ding mansion and Yelu Crown Prince are not opposing each other. Now, the Prince Ding mansion is not interested in the grasslands. We just want to drive the northern army back. What Yelu Yi did in the north, the princess must know." Princess Ronghua nodded heavily. She was the princess of the Dechu state. The destruction of the Dechu state would not benefit her at all. Since Mo Jingli took the Dechu state to the south, her position in the northern army was somewhat precarious. Because of this, she followed Yelu Hong to Li City. As long as the Prince Ding mansion recognized her existence, the stronger the Prince Ding mansion was, the safer it would be for her. The Crown Prince has also mentioned the withdrawal of troops to the King of the Northern Army many times, but the King of the Northern Army saw that the 7th Prince was unstoppable and did not unify the Crown Prince. Yi Li smiled, "Now the Northern Army is blocked by the Mahist Army. But after all, Yelu Yi still won a large territory for the Northern Army. As a result, the Crown Prince's position is somewhat unstable, right?" Princess Ronghua looked at Yi Li and nodded with some amazement. "Princess is right. This is also the reason why the Crown Prince was not willing to let the 7th Prince send troops. In the army, the 7th Prince has always had the upper hand. If he gets such achievements again, I am afraid there will be more people supporting him. At that time, the Crown Prince." Yi Li whispered, "The Mahist army can provide some help to the Crown Prince of the Northern Army. Then, what does the prince and princess want the crown prince to do?" Princess Ronghua asked. "There would not be a pie in the sky for no reason. If you want to get something, you always have to pay something." Yi Li smiled, "This. The prince will naturally talk to the crown prince of the Northern Army. The princess only needs to work hard at the appropriate time to let the crown prince of the Northern Army make a decision early. If you know too much, it will easily arouse the crown prince's suspicion." Princess Ronghua pondered for a moment. She had to admit that what Yi Li said was very reasonable. She nodded and agreed with what Yi Li said. After sending people to send the crown prince of the northern tribes back to the inn, Yi Li and Mo Xiuyao returned to their room hand in hand. "How did noble consort Lu meet Yelu Yi?" Yi Li asked curiously as she leaned against Mo Xiuyao's chest. Mo Xiuyao lazily leaned against the soft couch. He held a book in his hand and read it over and over again. His other hand played with Yi Li's hair. He lightly said, when Mo Jingqi passed away, the northern tribes sent Yelu Yi. It wouldn't be strange if noble consort Lu was saved by him. But don't you think it's strange that Yelu Yi is so infatuated with noble consort Lu? Yelu Ye's scheming ability is not inferior to Yelu Hong's. It's strange that he is so infatuated with a fugitive from the Chu state. This was something that Yi Li couldn't figure out. If it was infatuation, the gentler Yelu Hong being infatuated with noble consort Lu was more believable than Yelu Yi. Mo Xiaoyao put down the book, frowned and thought for a moment. He said, it's very likely that noble consort Lu has some bargaining chip in her hands that Yelu Yi values. Don't you think that Yelu Ye's previous attacks were too smooth? The northern tribes had always been an important opponent of the Chu state. However, Yelu Ye's attacks were even smoother than Ren Qining's in the north. This in itself was a bit surprising. However, at that time, the Chu state had been defeated 3 times. No one thought about it carefully. Could it be that noble consort Lu colluded with the enemy and betrayed the country? It's very possible. Mo Xiaoyao said indifferently, the Lu family is an important official of the imperial court. Although they haven't produced any talents who can lead troops into battle, the Lu family is a very important official. However, Mo Jingqi values the civil and belittles the military. The Lu family's people know a lot of military secrets. Although his expression didn't change, Yi Li could hear the killing intent in Mo Xiaoyao's voice. She frowned and said, if that's really the case, what do you plan to do? Mo Xiaoyao said, if that's the case, she doesn't need to leave Glass City. Before that, where are Mo Xiaoyun and Zhen Ning? Mo Xiaoyun was the prince of the Chu state. Although he had personally left the Chu capital, it wasn't suitable for him to stay there. Naturally, he had to move to the Prince Ding Mansion's headquarters in Glass City. Yi Li said, they've been placed in a mansion in the city. They're unwilling to leave either the Su Mansion or the General Lu Mansion. Mo Xiaoyao nodded and said with a smile, very good. Send someone to pass the news to Mo Xiaoyun and Zhen Ning. Since their mother is here, we can't keep them in the dark. Thinking about Princess Zhen Ning whose face had been disfigured, Yi Li sighed in her heart. When they had just arrived at Glass City, Yi Li had also seen the 2 children. Because Yi Li had saved Princess Zhen Ning's life, both Mo Xiaoyun and Princess Zhen Ning were very respectful towards her. Yi Li could see the hatred in Princess Zhen Ning's heart when she mentioned noble consort Lu. I understand. What do you think about the northern tribe's crown prince? Mo Xiaoyao lowered his eyes and said, compared to Yelu Yi, Yelu Hong's ambition is much smaller. However, this is also related to his calm character, which is different from the northern tribes. He sees things more clearly than Yelu Yi. If he knows what's good for him, he will naturally come and talk to us. Yi Li nodded and exhaled faintly. These days, dealing with these princes was even more tiring than being on the battlefield. Mo Xiaoyao lowered his head and looked at Yi Li, asking softly, does Yi Li feel tired? Shaking her head, Yi Li smiled faintly and said, I just feel that these things are too complicated. It's better to be on the battlefield. Mo Xiaoyao said gently, if Yi Li doesn't like it, you can leave it to me and Su Qingchen to deal with. There's no need to force it. Yi Li shook her head and leaned against Mo Xiaoyao to rest. Princess, Lin Han requests an audience. Lin Han's voice sounded from outside the door. Mo Xiaoyao looked up and said calmly, come in. Lin Han stepped into the room and glanced at Wang Yi and Wang Fei who were leaning against each other. He immediately lowered his eyes and said seriously, reporting to Wang Fei, Wang Fei just went to the Yi residence. Yi Li sat up and glared at Mo Xiaoyao who was rubbing against her unhappily. She asked, is there a problem? Lin Han looked straight ahead and said, the shadow guard found a person in the Yi family and felt that they should inform the prince and princess. Oh. Who is it? Yi Li asked curiously. She couldn't think of anything that would attract the attention of the shadow guard when the Yi family had already fallen to such a state. Lin Han said, "Yi Yu." "What?" Yi Li was stunned. Even Mo Xiaoyao looked up, his expression darkening. Yi Li looked at Lin Han with a serious expression and said calmly, "Tell me in detail." Lin Han said, after Princess Li returned to the Yi residence, she talked with the Yi family and was then brought back to her room by Yi Wangshe to talk alone. Princess Li and Yi Wangshe had different opinions and quarreled. The shadow guard hiding in the residence then found that a maid in Yi Wangshe's room was strange. The image that was sent showed that the maid was 70% similar to Yi Yu, who was burned to death in the palace. Yi Wenhua is so daring. Mo Xiaoyao's voice was sinister and Lin Han, who was standing beside him, couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. Yi Li had been missing for a long time because of the fire in the palace. That incident had left a deep impact on Mo Xiaoyao's heart. Even Mo Xiaoyao didn't expect that Yi Wenhua would dare to harbor Yi Yu. Chapter 761. Yi Li frowned slightly. Maybe he doesn't know. It wasn't that Yi Li felt that Yi Wenhua had a deep father-daughter relationship with her, but Yi Wenhua didn't seem like someone who would take such a risk for his daughter. Mo Xiaoyao laughed coldly, he doesn't know. Yi Yu is in Yi Wangshe's room. Even if he didn't know beforehand, wouldn't he be suspicious after such a long time? So, even if Yi Wenhua wasn't the mastermind, he would definitely turn a blind eye to it. Yi Li nodded and sighed, I know. I will personally go to the Yi residence later. If it really was Yi Yu, then who helped Yi Yu escape by faking her death? What was she hiding in the Yi residence for? It couldn't be that she wanted to conceal her identity for the rest of her life. If that was the case, she wouldn't have come to Glass City. Glass City was right under the nose of the Prince Ding mansion. It wasn't a good place to conceal one's identity. Princess Consort. Princess Consort Li's servant wishes to see you. Someone reported outside the door. Yi Li raised her eyebrows slightly, let her in. Very quickly, an inconspicuous little girl was brought in by someone. Seeing Yi Li, the servant girl immediately rushed forward and knelt on the ground, Princess Consort, I beg Princess Ding to save our Princess Consort. What happened? Yi Li frowned and started to worry. She didn't spend so much effort to nurture Yi Ying just to die here. The servant girl sobbed, our Princess Consort went to the Yi residence to greet old Madam, Master Yi, and Madam Yi. Then she angrily rushed out of the Yi family, saying that she wanted to come to the Prince Ding mansion. But the moment she left, she was brought back to the inn by the prince. This servant is a servant girl who does rough work in the Prince Ding mansion. This servant sneaked out to inform the Princess Consort in order to not attract attention. While the lass was speaking, another shadow guard from the Prince Ding mansion came to report that Yi Li had been brought back to the post house by Prince Li and placed under house arrest. Although Mo Xiaoyao's close subordinates were not easy to place, there were many people in the Prince Ding mansion in the post house. Of course, none of this could be hidden from the Prince Ding mansion. The shadow guard quickly explained what had happened, and it was exactly the same as what the little girl had said. Yi Li thought for a moment and said, Yi Ying knew about Yi Yu and wanted to go to the Prince Ding mansion to tell us, so she was put under house arrest by Mo Jingli. But that's not right. Why would Yi Ying betray her own sister for us? Mo Xiaoyao said, naturally, it's because Yi Yu has a conflict of interest with her. Yi Yu is Mo Jingqi's favorite concubine, and we're not sure if she's one of Mo Jingqi's people or one of the Empress Dowager's people. To Mo Jingli, she's not a useless person. Hearing this, Yi Li came to a sudden realization. She thought for a moment and said to the shadow guard, go back and tell Princess Consort Li to make a fuss with Prince Li. The more she makes a fuss, the less Prince Li will suspect her. Also, let her think about it. Even if it really is Yi Yu, as long as she can stay calm, she won't be able to threaten her position. The shadow guard nodded silently and turned to leave. Yi Li also stood up and looked at Mo Xiaoyao, saying, "It seems that I really need to go to the Yi residence." Mo Xiaoyao pulled her and said, "If you go now, Mo Jingli will be suspicious. There are people watching over the Yi residence. If there's any trouble, you can go tomorrow." In the courier station, Yi Ying waved her hand and dismissed the servant who suddenly appeared in her room. She slowly wiped away the tears on her face and sat up. "Someone come." After a while, a guard appeared at the door. "Princess consort, the prince has ordered that the princess consort is not to go out." Yi Ying said coldly, "I don't want to go out." "Go invite the prince over. Just say that I have something to tell him." The guard hesitated, but after seeing Yi Ying's rare cold expression, he nodded and went to report to Mo Jingli. Seeing the guard leave, Yi Ying closed the door again. Her once gentle eyes revealed a resentful light. Her lips that had turned white from biting them trembled slightly. "Second sister. Second sister. Why don't you just die?" Thinking about how she suddenly saw her second sister, who she thought had passed away, Yi Ying's face couldn't help but turn ugly. What she didn't expect was that her mother and grandmother would make such a request. And her second sister was really her good second sister. Third sister was right. Yi Ying slowly calmed down the anger in her heart and forced a smile on her face. Gradually, the smile of the person in the bronze mirror on the table became more and more natural, with a trace of grievance and gentleness. Third sister was right. As long as she was steady, no one could ever surpass her position. At least, Princess Xixia couldn't, and Yi Yu couldn't. After a while, Mo Jingli pushed the door open and walked in. With an unfriendly expression, he said, "What else do you want?" Yi Ying threw herself into Mo Jingli's arms with tears in her eyes and started sobbing. Mo Jingli frowned and looked coldly at the woman in his arms who was crying very sadly. Yi Ying grabbed Mo Jingli's collar with one hand and cried, "Prince, Prince, don't treat Ying like this. Ying knows she was wrong." Mo Jingli pushed her away and sneered, "You know you were wrong. What did you want to see at the Prince Ding mansion just now? You wanted to tell Mo Xiaoyao about what happened at the Yi family?" Yi Ying shook her head and said, "Prince wronged me. Ying is not familiar with Prince Ding. I just..." Sob, "Prince and second sister did this. Where did they place her? Even mother and grandfather helped second sister. Ying felt wronged. Third sister said that if I had any grievances, I could tell her. All of you bullied me. What's wrong with me crying to third sister? Prince, you are so cruel. Ying has been with you for so many years. Our child's whereabouts are still unknown. You can't wait." Sob. Hearing Yi Li's name, Mo Jingli was slightly stunned and said, "What's the difference between telling Yi Li and telling Mo Xiaoyao?" Yi Ying said loudly, "Why can't I tell you about such shameful things that you did?" Mo Jingli frowned and looked at Yi Ying for a long time. Finally, he said, "What nonsense are you talking about? Yi Yu is still useful. It's not what you think." Yi Ying did not believe him, "Really? Prince really doesn't plan to bring second sister into the mansion?" Mo Jingli said coldly, "I am not that desperate to want an old woman. Yi Yu is still useful to I, don't mess around." As if she really believed Mo Jingli's words, Yi Ying wiped her tears and looked at him pitifully. "I know, Ying was wrong. But you can't blame Ying for this. If people know that second sister and prince, how can I still have the face to stay in the Li mansion?" Looking at her delicate appearance, with tears on her eyelashes, looking wronged and worried, Mo Jingli's expression eased a lot. After all, he still had some true feelings for Yi Ying in the past. He nodded and said, "It's good that you understand. You can't tell anyone about this. In the future, you can go to the Prince Ding mansion more often. You can rest in the inn for these 2 days." Yi Ying nodded obediently, "I understand." Chapter 762. After comforting Yi Ying, Mo Jingli turned around and went to the study alone. Sitting in the study, Mo Jingli frowned as he thought about the result of his conversation with Yi Yu at the Yi family. No matter how one looked at it, offending Mo Xiaoyao in Li City for Yi Yu was an extremely unwise decision. Mo Jingli was naturally not someone who would lose his head over lust. However, Yi Yu had a condition that he had no choice but to agree to. Taking out a small jade green porcelain bottle from his sleeve, Mo Jingli's eyes faintly lit up with eagerness. If he successfully brought Yi Yu back to the southwest, he would receive 10 times or even 100 times what he had paid. Actually, back then, Mo Jingli could be considered to have saved Yi Li's life. The Empress Dowager originally wanted to kill Yi Li, but Yi Yu was forced by the Empress Dowager. However, Mo Jingli did not want to kill Yi Li at that time. Therefore, after Yi Yu's plan was carried out, he sent people to interfere and take Yi Li out of the palace. If not, Yi Li might really have been killed by Yi Yu. After taking Yi Li away, Mo Jingli did not pay attention to Yi Yu. A concubine of his brother and a pawn in his mother's hands was not worth his attention. Therefore, when Yi Yu was burned to death in the fire, he only thought that his mother killed her to silence her. However, he did not expect that not only did Yi Yu not die, she even avoided the eyes of the Empress Dowager, the palace, and even the Prince Ding mansion and lived peacefully for so many years. She even came to Li City and came under Mo Xiaoyao's nose. Without a doubt, compared to Yi Ying who only had looks, Yi Yu was the truly intelligent person. Even compared to the group of women in his brother's harem, Yi Yu was the most intelligent one. As long as he could bring Yi Yu back to Jiangnan, then, the Empress Dowager, who had been troubling him, would no longer be his obstacle. The Empress Dowager had operated in the palace for decades. Even when Mo Jingli was still alive, she had always been at his mercy, not to mention Mo Jingli, who had been in power for far longer than Mo Jingli. Originally, after so many years of suppression by Mo Jingqi and his final attack before his death, the Empress Dowager's power should have been on the verge of collapse. But who would have thought that after Mo Jingli came to power, the Empress Dowager seemed to have the help of God and was able to regain her footing in the court. Mo Jingli knew that there must be someone behind this. He even knew who it was, but there was nothing he could do. He could suppress the Empress Dowager's power, but he couldn't fight with her to the point where both sides suffered and others benefited. Mo Jingli knew better than anyone else about his mother's methods and ruthlessness. He also knew that in the Empress Dowager's heart, supporting Mo Suyun, that 7 or 8-year-old brat, was more satisfying to the Empress Dowager than her son becoming emperor. Even after the Empress Dowager's funeral was left unsettled, Mo Jingli often suspected that the Empress Dowager was constantly thinking of ways to depose him. But with Yi Yu, it was different. Yi Yu had some information that could be used against the Empress Dowager. As long as she used it well, she could even wipe out the Empress Dowager's power in one fell swoop. Yi Yu was very smart. While she was being threatened and used by the Empress Dowager, she also secretly collected a lot of the Empress Dowager's secrets. If Yi Yu hadn't left too early, Mo Jingli even believed that Yi Yu would definitely have a way to get the whereabouts of his son from Mo Jingli. Unfortunately, compared to Yi Li, Yi Yu's luck was really too bad. When Mo Jingqi was alive, he doted on noble consort Lu more than Yi Yu, so even someone as smart as her could only keep a low profile in the palace. And how could a concubine go against the Empress Dowager's authority, especially when her father was also on the Empress Dowager's side? After pondering for a long time, Mo Jingli's eyes finally flashed with a trace of determination. Actually, even if there weren't any reasons from above, Mo Jingli still had to bring Yi Yu back. Unconsciously rubbing the small bottle in his hand, Mo Jingli's brows furrowed even more. Right now, it was impossible to send Yi Yu out of Glass City first. The Prince Ding mansion's security was so tight that it made people afraid. The only way was to let Yi Yu blend in with the Prince Ding mansion's entourage when they left Glass City and leave without anyone knowing. But this was something that would happen many days later. In these few days, since Yi Yu could come to Glass City quietly and hide herself for so many years, nothing should happen in these few days, right? Mo Jingli thought in his heart. In the Yi residence's study, Yi Wenhua sat with a gloomy expression. His originally white brows were tightly knitted. Ever since Prince Li and Yi Ying left, he had a faint feeling of uneasiness. Thinking about the person in his wife's room. Even though he had left the court for many years, Yi Wenhua still believed in his intuition. This kind of intuition towards danger had helped him avoid danger many times in the court. Even though he was the son-in-law of the Su family, at least during the years when the Su family left the court, he had relied on himself to fight for it. Not only did he not let the Yi family decline, but he also became more prosperous. Ever since he came to Glass City, Yi Wenhua was different from the unwilling Madame Yi and Madame Yi. He was very satisfied with his current life. He had been poor and rich before. He had studied hard, and he had almost reached the top of the court. He had married the most beautiful and talented woman in Dechu State. Even now, his daughter was the regent princess consort of Dechu State and the princess consort of the Prince Ding Mansion. In the end, he fell from his high position and became a commoner. If it was in the past, he might still be greedy for fame and fortune. But after seeing the suffering of the people in the war, he knew that the stable life he had now was not easy to come by. Yi Wenhua knew clearly that as long as he stayed in Glass City obediently, no one would make things difficult for him because of his identity as Princess Ding's father. But if he went to Jiangnan, even if Mo Jingli could put him in an important position, how long could Jiangnan last? To be honest, after so many years, Yi Wenhua did not have much hope in Mo Jingli's ability. Moreover, compared to Mo Jingli, he was more willing to believe in Mo Xiuyao's character. "Master, what's wrong? Why do you look so pale?" Madame Yi walked in with a cup of tonic and asked Yi Wenhua with a smile. Yi Wenhua came back to his senses and looked coldly at her complacent smile. A trace of disgust flashed through his heart. He did not know why, but the face of his wife, who he thought was already blurred, appeared clearly in his mind. At that moment, he even began to wonder why he had neglected his first wife for the sake of Madame Yi. In terms of appearance, talent, virtue, and family background, Madame Su could throw Madame Yi and Madame Wang by 8 streets. Perhaps, it was because Madame Su was too outstanding. An overly outstanding, fairy-like noble lady fell in love with a poor boy who was born in a poor family. After the initial ecstasy, it was followed by a defeat and pressure that made him feel ashamed of his own inferiority. And the envious and strange gazes of his colleagues, "The person in your room, kick her out immediately." Yi Wenhua came back to his senses and looked at Madame Wang, whose eyes were filled with joy, and said coldly, "What?" Madame Wang was stunned and immediately screamed. Yi Wenhua stared at her and said coldly, "Do you think I'm blind? You can kick her out, or else you can go out with her." Chapter 763. Wang Shi felt a chill in her heart when he looked at her, but she was more angry. She put the things in her hands on the table heavily and said angrily, "Since you know, why do you want me to drive her out? You know. You know that if the Prince Ding Mansion knows." Yi Wenhua interrupted her impatiently, "Since you know, you shouldn't have brought her here. No one cared about you in your hometown. Do you think no one knows about you in Li City? Not many people have seen her, but it's not like no one has seen her. If she didn't die, Yi Yu knew how to hide well. Besides, she entered the palace early, so not many people had seen her. She might have been recognized by others." Yi Wenhua certainly knew that there were people from the Prince Ding Mansion in the Yi Mansion. Because of this, Yi Yu couldn't stay in the Yi Mansion. In recent years, Yi Wenhua rarely lost his temper like this. Yi Wangshi couldn't help but be stunned. After a while, she cried, "She is a weak girl. If she doesn't come with us, how do you want her to live? It's all because of you. If we went to Jiangnan directly, it would be better than living here without food." Now there were wars everywhere. It was not easy for a weak girl to go to Jiangnan from her hometown, let alone in this situation. If she was not careful, she might be caught by the bandits on the road even if she didn't encounter a war. At that time, her life would be even worse than death. Yi Wenhua sneered because of the naivety of the woman in front of him. Mo Jingli was already dissatisfied with the Yi family's indecisiveness in front of the Empress Dowager and the Emperor. Later, he hid the news of Yi Ying's pregnancy and kept her in the capital. That led to Yi Ying's imprisonment and the baby was swapped. Mo Jingli was a person who would seek revenge for the smallest grievance. He would treat the Yi family well unless there was something wrong with his brain. Wang Shi didn't care about this and said, no matter what, you, is the master's daughter. Is the master really so cruel to make you his enemy? After a few days, Prince Li has already agreed to bring us back to Jiangnan. When that time comes, we won't have to suffer in Glass City anymore. Rong, will definitely have a bright future. When that time comes, our Yi family will definitely return to its former prosperity. Is there anything wrong with that? Master only cares about Yi Li now, but what has she done for our family? She only cares about her own happiness and doesn't care about you, her father. It's still only my Yu, who thinks for our family. Stupid woman. Yi Wenhua scolded. She actually believed that Mo Jingli would leave with the entire Yi family. With Mo Jingli's personality, wouldn't the Prince Ding mansion be suspicious if he suddenly left with so many people? I don't care what you think. I don't plan to go to Jiangnan, Yi Wenhua said. Yi Wangshi was really stunned this time. Wealth was important, but so was her daughter. But these were all based on the fact that Yi Wenhua was still there. Yi Wangshi still had some self-awareness about her son. He couldn't support the Yi family. If Yi Wenhua didn't want to go to Jiangnan, even if they all went, they wouldn't have much time in Jiangnan. No matter how much Wang Shi liked to calculate, she was still a lady who hadn't seen much of the world. She didn't dare to leave her husband and leave with her daughter. Why? Yi Wangshi couldn't help but scream, do you like to stay in Glass City and live under the nose of others? What's wrong with going to Jiangnan? At that time, the Yi family will still be respected and envied like before. Isn't it better than hiding in this broken courtyard? Shut up. Yi Wenhua said sternly. You're still thinking about that bitch, right? Wang Shi finally couldn't help but burst out. Although her family wasn't prominent, she was still the daughter of a rich family. When she married into the Yi family as a concubine, she felt wronged. But the lady of the Yi family was the kind of person who couldn't make you jealous. When the gap between you and the other party was too big, you didn't even have the right to be jealous. You only had a sense of inferiority. Although Yi Wenhua had always doted on her, she knew very well that she couldn't be compared to Su. Every time Yi Wenhua looked at Su, there was a feeling in his eyes that even he didn't notice. It was like a poisonous thorn in her heart. Even though Su had passed away for many years, it couldn't be removed. It was ridiculous. Yi Wenhua didn't dislike Su, but he didn't dare to like her. Because he knew that he didn't deserve his wife. Slap. Yi Wenhua seemed to be irritated. He slapped Wang Shi's face without mercy. Wang Shi didn't stand firm and fell to the ground. She was stunned and finally couldn't help crying out loud. What's wrong? Madame Ye's voice came from outside the door. Yi Wenhua snorted and turned to the door. Mother, why are you here? When he saw the person holding Madame Yi, he paused and slowly moved his eyes away. Madame Yi frowned and said unhappily, if I didn't come, would you turn the whole house upside down? What are you doing? Madame Yi held Yi Yu's hand and stepped into the study. Yi Yu closed the door behind her. Madame Yi. You. Wang Shi cried even more when she saw Madame Yi and her daughter. Yi Yu went forward and held Wang Shi up. She asked softly, Father, what's wrong? Why? Yi Wenhua snorted and said, you still know that I'm your father. Yi Yu paused and showed a gentle smile on her face, I know that it's my fault to hide it from you. It's because. Father, you know that I didn't want to hurt third sister. I had no choice but to do it. I had no choice. It's not easy for me to live these years. Please forgive me. Compared to Yi Ying, Yi Yu was better at talking and understood people's hearts. Even if Yi Wenhua's heart was as hard as iron, he couldn't help but soften his expression. Of course, he knew about what happened back then. If someone said that Yi Yu wanted to kill Yi Li on a whim, not only would he not believe it, even Yi Li herself would not believe it. At that time, the Yi family was controlled by the Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager wanted to kill Yi Li. Yi Yu was also threatened. Looking at Yi Yu's appearance, although she was still beautiful, she was much thinner and paler than when she was in the Yi family and in the palace. It was because of her paleness and thinness that made her look younger than her real age. She stayed in Wang Shi's room for so long and rarely went out, but she didn't attract any attention. After all, she had suffered a lot. Since that's the case, you should stay here obediently. When the time is right, I'll think of a way to send you away from Glass City. You can live in seclusion. Yi Yu was his daughter after all. Yi Wenhua's heart softened. Yi Yu was stunned. She lowered her eyes and said, Prince Li already knows that I'm in Glass City. He said that he'll bring us to Jiangnan. Father, I'm afraid that. Why would Mo Jingli bring you to Jiangnan? Yi Wenhua asked coldly. Mo Jingli had always been a person who wouldn't do anything without benefits. Anyone with a discerning eye could tell that he didn't have much feelings for Yi Ying. He suddenly agreed to bring Yi Yu to Jiangnan. Who would believe that he didn't have any use for her? More importantly, even the people in the Prince Ding mansion didn't know that Yi Yu was in the mansion. If she didn't purposely expose herself to Mo Jingli, how would Mo Jingli know about her whereabouts? Chapter 764. Yi Yu's face flashed with embarrassment. That's right, she followed Wang Shi to Li City on purpose. She also purposely let Mo Jingli know that she had a trump card in her hand and something very important to him. What was wrong with that? How much had she suffered in hiding for so many years? She was originally an imperial concubine. She also had a son of the late emperor. Her son was much smarter than the useless Mo Suyun in the Chu state. As long as she operated well, she might be able to become the Empress Dowager. Why did she have to hide her identity and live the rest of her life in fear? Father, as long as we go to Jiangnan. Mo Jingli promised me to help my son ascend the throne. At that time, you will be the real father-in-law of the emperor. The Yi family will prosper from then on. Yi Yu looked at Yi Wenhua and said seriously. However, Yi Wenhua was not as easy to persuade as she thought. I believe that Li Er's child will ascend to the throne in the future. If you stay in Glass City, at least you can let your brother marry and have children safely. You can leave a descendant for the Yi family. Yi Wenhua now understood that Yi Rong had been spoiled by old Madame Yi and Yi Wangshi. Now, he only hoped that Yi Rong's son could be raised well and not end the bloodline of the Yi family. Hearing Yi Wenhua's words, Yi Yu's eyes flashed with a trace of bitterness. In father's eyes, I am not as good as third sister. If she was not forced by the Empress Dowager and had to hide her identity, why would she be in such dire straits now? Yi Wenhua shook his head and said, You are different from Yi Li. Yi Yu was very smart. She might even be smarter than Yi Li. But she was different from Yi Li. She should not be compared to Yi Li. If they were both in the palace, Yi Wenhua believed that Yi Li might not be able to win against Yi Yu. However, from the very beginning, Yi Li's gaze did not stop at the back of the palace. She had courage and ability that did not lose out to a man. Therefore, she could assist Prince Ding in governing a region. She could mount a horse and command thousands of soldiers and horses. Placing such a woman in the inner court of the palace would only trample on her ability. There were many times when Yi Wenhua regretted that Yi Li was not a son. If she were a boy, she would be able to protect the Yi family for at least 3 generations no matter what the world was like. Yi Li understood what Yi Wenhua meant. She was proud of her intelligence, but she also knew that she couldn't be like Yi Li. They were different from the start. We are indeed different. Third sister would not care about the rise and fall of the Yi family. With the support of the Su family, whether the Yi family was good or bad, it would not affect her. But I'm different. Father, I'll only be well if the Yi family is well. Therefore, you, will never abandon the Yi family, Yi Yu said softly. Yi Wenhua didn't have any reaction, but old Madam Yi showed her approval. Yi Li's indifference towards the Yi family was obvious to anyone with a discerning eye. Even if Yi Li became the mother of the country in the future, only the Su family would be able to benefit from it, not the Yi family. Among all the granddaughters, old Madam Yi loved Yi Yu the most. Hearing what she said, she naturally felt that it was very reasonable. She looked at Yi Wenhua and wanted to persuade him. Yi Wenhua waved his hand and said tiredly, Mother, you don't have to say any more. The Yi family can't leave Glass City. Old Madam Yi frowned and said, What are you talking about? Yi Li doesn't care about our family at all. Are you going to stick to her? Old Madam Yi was very dissatisfied with this granddaughter who didn't give her face. Yi Wenhua shook his head helplessly and smiled bitterly. His mother was old. She was not as smart as she was when she was young. The Yi family came to Glass City from afar and then left with Mo Jingli's family. Even if the Prince Ding mansion didn't have Yi Yu, it was impossible for them not to investigate, let alone Yi Yu. With this investigation, how could they leave for the Yi family? He looked at Yi Yu and said, Since you have decided to leave with Prince Li, you can leave now. Father. Yi Yu didn't expect Yi Wenhua to be so stubborn and heartless. What nonsense are you talking about? Old Madam Yi was furious, You, is my granddaughter. If you want to chase her away, why don't you chase me away too? Old Madam Yi had long hated her days in Glass City. She wanted to go to Jiangnan. In Jiangnan, she would be the princess consort's grandmother again. She would be the noble old Madam Yi in Chu capital. Old Madam, the servant outside hurried in and reported, Prince Ding and Princess Ding are here. Hearing this, everyone was shocked. Yi Yu's face was pale. Back then, she tried to kill Yi Li. Although she was forced to do it, it couldn't change the fact. Although Yi Yu had been living incognito all these years, she had heard many rumors. Mo Xiuyao's cold-bloodedness was well known to her. How could she not be shocked when she heard that Mo Xiuyao was here? Yi Wenhua was also shocked, but he calmed down quickly. He stood up and said, Got it. I will go out and welcome Prince Ding and Princess Consort. No need. The servant outside the door said timidly, Prince Ding and Princess Consort have already come in. The door was suddenly opened from the outside. Mo Xiuyao and Yi Li walked in hand. Standing outside the door, they could clearly see everyone in the study. Because of the backlight, Yi Yu could only see the two figures in white walking in hand. The sunlight formed a circle of light behind them. It was as if the gods had descended. For a moment, she couldn't see their expressions clearly. Seeing the two getting closer, Yi Yu couldn't help but take a step back. Looking around, she realized in despair that there was no place for her to hide except for the door in the study. She had to face Mo Xiuyao and Yi Li. Stepping into the study, which was not very spacious, suddenly became a little crowded. Mo Xiuyao frowned with dissatisfaction. He pulled Yi Li to the soft couch in front and sat down. He raised his eyebrows and asked, What's going on? Why is the study so lively? Yi Wangshe tried to squeeze out a smile. She smiled apologetically, No, nothing. We are talking to Master. His Highness and Her Highness are here. Why haven't you left yet? Yi Yu lowered her head. She quickly bowed and walked out of the door. Just as she was about to step out of the study, Yi Li's faint laughter came from behind. Second sister, we haven't seen each other for many years. Are you leaving like this? Chapter 765. Yi Yu, who had already walked to the door, suddenly froze. Looking at the expressionless guards in black standing outside the door, Yi Yu finally turned around with a pale face. Looking at Yi Li, who was sitting on the main seat with a faint smile, she said lightly, "Third sister, long time no see." Hadn't it been so many years? It had been almost 10 years since the last time they met. The young girl, who was still a little immature in Yi Yu's eyes, had now grown up to be the princess consort of Ding who could take charge at any time. Even in terms of appearance, the beauty that Yi Yu used to be proud of was so weak and ridiculous in front of Yi Li. Yi Li might not be the most beautiful woman in the world, but she was definitely the most unique and attractive woman in the world. She was completely different from the calmness and gentleness of any beautiful woman in the world. She was calm and elegant, and had a tenacity and sharpness that even men could not match. So many different temperaments would not appear on the same person at the same time. But because of this, Yi Li was completely different from any woman in the world. It was no wonder that Mo Jingli still couldn't forget it and even hated Mo Xiuyao. Prince Ding was really lucky and had good taste. Many people had said this sentence. Even someone as proud as Yi Yu had to admit that her sister from the same father did pay attention to making Prince Ding, who looked down on the world, bow down. Looking at Yi Yu's calmness, Yi Li's eyes flashed with a trace of admiration. "How have you been these years, second sister?" Yi Yu lowered her eyes and smiled faintly. "What's there to be good about? I'm just living an ignoble life." While Yi Yu was looking at Yi Li was also looking at Yi Yu. No wonder the people arranged by Prince Ding Mansion in the Yi Mansion did not recognize her. Not to mention that Yi Yu had been living in seclusion and rarely met people, her current appearance made it difficult for people to associate her with the beautiful Yi Jiaoyi from many years ago. After so many years, Yi Yu's appearance had also changed greatly. In the past, Yi Yu was delicate and charming. Now, Yi Yu's beauty was still the same, but there was a hint of gentleness and delicateness to her. If Yi Yu was a begonia in the past, then the current Yi Yu was more like an osmanthus flower. It didn't look as dazzling as before, but if one looked closely, it would make one feel nostalgic again and again. If they didn't know in advance, even if they saw Yi Yu from somewhere else, they would only think that she was someone who looked similar to her. "Since you're living an ignoble life, why don't you just die?" Mo Xiuyao, who was beside Yi Li, asked casually. Even if the words that came out of his mouth were almost emotionless, one could still feel the endless killing intent. Yi Yu's face turned pale. In the entire glass city, the person she feared the most was Mo Xiuyao. If it was Yi Li, she could still deal with her with words. But against Mo Xiuyao, she couldn't do anything. If possible, Yi Yu really didn't want to go against Mo Xiuyao and Yi Li. She didn't even want to have anything to do with the Prince Ding Mansion. But from the moment she came to Glass City, she was destined to face Mo Xiuyao and Yi Li. It wasn't just Yi Yu. Yi Wenhua, old Madame Yi, and Wang Shi, who were standing at the side, also turned pale. Wang Shi suppressed the fear in her heart and stood in front of Yi Yu. "Prince, what do you mean by this? Yu, is the daughter of the Yi family. Can't she be here?" Mo Xiuyao held Yi Li's hand with one hand and leaned against the armrest with the other. He knocked on the mahogany armrest at a leisurely pace, but everyone's hearts were in their throats. After a while, Mo Xiuyao smiled faintly. "It seems that Madame Yi has forgotten what your daughter did to Yi Li." Yi Wangshi trembled slightly. That was so long ago. Moreover, isn't Yi Li fine now? Mo Xiuyao narrowed his eyes and laughed out of anger. "That makes sense. Since that's the case, I'll let Yi Yu die. Let this prince / Yi Yu. If she doesn't die, then the matter of hurting Yi Li will be written off." Hearing this, Yi Wangshi was so frightened that she almost screamed. Yi Yu also gritted her teeth and didn't say a word. If Prince Ding wanted to kill someone, how could he not kill them with one strike? Yi Yu wasn't a martial arts expert. In fact, she was just a weak girl who didn't even have the strength to truss a chicken. In terms of martial arts, she wasn't even comparable to Murong Ting, Hua Tianxiang, who was born in a military family, and noble consort Lu, who was known to be proficient in both literature and martial arts. Madame Yi frowned and said, "What happened that year was indeed Yu-er's fault, but Yu-er was also forced by others. She also suffered a lot these years. Seeing that you're sisters, please don't be calculative." Yi Li tilted her head and looked at Madame Yi with a faint smile. Although she said that she was pleading, Madame Ye's tone didn't seem to be the case. On the contrary, it sounded like an elder giving orders to the younger generation. Although Madame Yi was indeed Yi Li's elder, she forgot that Yi Li was no longer someone she could order around. "Grandmother, second sister almost killed me that year. Although grandmother loves second sister more since she was young, she is also your granddaughter. Grandmother's heart is too biased." Madame Yi was stunned. Of course, she knew that she was biased. She had always thought that it was natural for her to be biased. Compared to Yi Li, who grew up with the Su family and the other half of her life by Madame Su's side, Yi Yu grew up by her side. Yi Yu was pretty, smart, and knew how to please her. Why wasn't she biased? It was just that this was the first time she heard Yi Li say it so openly. Wrinkling her white brows, old Madame Yi frowned and said, "Grandmother knows that you have been wronged, but now there are only you and your sisters left in the Yi family. Can't you be more generous?" Yi Li blinked and couldn't help laughing. Madame Yi didn't think that she was complaining that she wasn't favored, right? She looked up at Mo Xiuyao. Mo Xiuyao raised his eyebrows. That was what Madame Yi meant. Yi Li smiled and asked slowly, "Grandmother, if I let second sister go, what are you going to do with her?" Before Madame Yi said anything, Yi Wenhua said seriously, "I will build a Buddhist hall in the mansion. In the future, she will live in the mansion and pray to Buddha. She will never go out." "Nonsense." Madame Ye's face darkened. She stared at Yi Wenhua unhappily. She spent so much effort to persuade Yi Li. It was not suitable for her to build a Buddhist hall in the mansion and keep an idle person. Yi Li raised her eyebrows and looked at Yi Wenhua with a smile. She said, "Grandmother, what do you mean?" Madame Yi raised her eyes and said, "Since you and Prince Ding don't welcome us, your father and I plan to go to Jiangnan with Ying. Since you and are sisters, why don't you let her come with us?" "Father, do you mean the same?" Yi Li looked at Yi Wenhua and asked lightly. She didn't believe that Yi Wenhua didn't know about the relationship between the Prince Ding mansion and Mo Jingli. If he chose to leave with them, it meant that he also planned to be the enemy of the Prince Ding mansion. Then she didn't need to be polite. "No." Yi Wenhua shook his head and said, "I won't leave Li City. Yi Rong won't leave either. I don't want anything else. I just want to see Rong get married and have children." Yi Li was very satisfied with Yi Wenhua's choice. Even if she didn't like Yi Wenhua, it couldn't change the fact that he was her biological father. Yi Li wasn't the kind of person who was so heartless that she wouldn't care about killing her own father. After all, she had been in a military family for more than 20 years in her previous life. She still had a good view of the world. As long as Yi Wenhua didn't do anything to endanger the Prince Ding mansion, Yi Li didn't think it was difficult to take care of him in his old age. Of course, that was all. Chapter 766. Yi Li was satisfied, but the others were not. Yi Wangshi and old Madame Yi screamed at Yi Wenhua angrily. In the past, Yi Wenhua would compromise in front of his father and wife, but this time, he was very determined. No matter how old Madame Yi scolded him, he refused to say anything. Yi Wenhua, who had been in the government for half of his life, was definitely more sensitive than old Madame Yi, Yi Wangshi, and even Yi Yu. Once he compromised and expressed his willingness to leave with them, today would be the end of the Yi family. He believed that Yi Li would not kill him because of their father-daughter relationship, but Mo Xiuyao was also known for his ruthlessness. Mo Xiuyao, who had been watching the show, seemed to be tired of the farce in front of him. He sat up and looked at everyone with a faint smile. Old Madam Yi. Do you know that the Prince Ding mansion and the Dechu state have a grudge against each other? Old Madam Yi was stunned. Obviously, she did not understand what Mo Xiaoyao meant. Mo Xiaoyao said casually, since the Yi family has settled down in Li City, then they are under the Prince Ding mansion. Now you are telling me that I plan to bring the man who tried to assassinate Ai's concubine to Jiangnan to seek refuge with the Li Palace. Can I assume that you are planning to, rebel? Old Madam Ye's eyes widened in horror. She couldn't understand how this matter could be related to rebellion. But this did not stop her from knowing what kind of serious crime it was to rebel. How can this be considered? We are not under your Prince Ding mansion. Wang Shi screamed. Mo Xiaoyao's lips curved into a smile, not someone from Prince Ding's residence. That meant they were Mo Jingli's men. Then, I can also treat you as spies. How about it? For the sake of Mr. Li, I will allow you to choose the way you like to die. This time, old Madam Yi and Madam Yi were really scared. They looked at Mo Xiaoyao's handsome face and trembled. No. Don't. Yi Yu, who had been silent all this while, took a step back and fell into the chair behind her. In the end, she had underestimated the abilities of the Prince Ding mansion. She had planned everything well. She avoided the chaos of war and followed Wang Shi to Li City. She met Mo Jingli and persuaded Mo Jingli as she wished. However, he didn't expect to be defeated at this critical juncture. In the end, she was just a weak woman without the strength to truss a chicken. No matter how smart he was, without enough bargaining chips, he would not be able to withstand a single blow from a colossus like the Prince Ding mansion. And obviously, Yi Yu was the type of person who didn't have enough bargaining chips. The bargaining chips in her hands were only useful to Mo Jingli. In the eyes of others, they were of little value. Mo Xiaoyao stood up and walked slowly to Yi Yu. He lifted her chin condescendingly and looked at her carefully for a long time. Then, he said lightly, "You are the first person who dared to make a move on Mr. Li. I have always remembered you." Hearing this, Yi Yu didn't feel the slightest bit of surprise. Instead, she shivered. Her beautiful eyes were full of fear. However, Yi Yu could escape from the Empress Dowager and the imperial family. She could also escape the investigation of the Prince Ding mansion. She had traveled thousands of miles from the capital to the Yi family's hometown in the southwest. She could even live peacefully for so many years. Naturally, she wouldn't be so easily frightened. After calming down, Yi Yu tried to make her voice sound calmer. She said to Mo Xiaoyao, "Prince, what happened to third sister?" "It was the Empress Dowager who forced me. I also had no other choice." "Prince, please be magnanimous. Yi Yu will repay Prince's kindness of not killing me even if it costs me my life." "Forced you to do it?" Mo Xiaoyao sneered. He shook off Yi Yu's chin with disdain. "Do you think I will let that old woman go? I don't care if you were forced or not. Those who hurt Mr. Li deserve to die. Even if someone forced you, you should die yourself. Why don't you die? If you die, perhaps I will avenge you and let your son be the emperor." Yi Yu had seen many unreasonable people. However, this was the first time Yi Yu had seen someone ask, "Why don't you die?" so matter-of-factly. For a moment, she couldn't come back to her senses. After a while, she trembled and said, "Prince, you mean, the Empress Dowager forced me to kill third sister, so I should die myself?" "That's right." Mo Xiaoyao nodded with satisfaction and said, "All of you can die. Only I, Mr. Li, can't be hurt. I will make anyone who dares to hurt her regret living. You should be satisfied after living for so many years." "Lunatic," Yi Yu said with a trembling voice. She turned to look at Yi Li and smiled bitterly. "Third sister, are you really not afraid of being with such a lunatic?" Mo Xiaoyao's face darkened. A trace of ruthlessness flashed across his eyes. He raised his hand and was about to slap Yi Li's head. Behind him, Yili raised her hand and grabbed his wrist. She pulled his hand back and interlocked their fingers. Seeing Yi Yu's shocked expression, Yili smiled faintly and said, "Why should I be afraid? I believe that if there is only one person in this world who won't hurt me, it will be him. Don't you think it's a very blissful thing to have such a person by your side?" Blissful? Yi Yu stared blankly at the two people standing side by side in front of her. A trace of confusion flashed across her eyes. Once she looked back, she realized that she had never experienced blissful in her life. The only time she felt happy was when she was a young girl before entering the palace. Moreover, it was after Lady Su passed away and Lady Wang was promoted to the head wife. Because before that, she was just a concubine's daughter in the Yi family. These days only lasted for 2 or 3 years. When she entered the palace, she was walking on thin ice everywhere. How could she be happy? Mo Jingqi had never loved her. Of course, she had never loved Mo Jingqi. Therefore, she did not understand what Yili meant by blissful. But looking at the two's tightly interlocked hands, her heart was incomparably envious and lonely. "Second sister, tell me, what did you use to exchange with Mo Jingli?" Yili asked softly. Yi Yu closed her eyes and did not speak. Yili did not get angry. She smiled faintly and said, "Second sister, I don't want to torture you. With your body, I'm afraid you won't be able to endure it." Yi Yu coldly said, "What difference does it make whether I can endure it or not? Do you think Prince Ding will spare me?" Mo Xiaoyao smiled and said, "He won't. But I seem to remember that the person who did the autopsy reported that the child burned to death in the fire was not the 5th prince." Yi Yu's expression finally became ugly. "Mo Xiaoyao, you dare. Is there anything in this world that I don't dare to do?" Mo Xiaoyao asked. "You are very smart. You didn't bring that child to Li City. That child also looks a bit like Mo Jingqi. But you're not smart enough. That is, you shouldn't have brought him to the northwest." Yi Yu's face was pale. She gritted her teeth and said, "I'll say. Back then, the emperor gave Mo Jingli a drug. I have the antidote." Mo Xiaoyao frowned. "Antidote? Didn't you say that there was no antidote?" At that time, he had also looked for Shen Yang to study the drug. Shen Yang had casually thrown it away after a glance, saying that there was no antidote. Yi Wenhua's face was as calm as water. He stared at Wang Shi, who was crying for a long time. Just when Wang Shi thought that he was going to say something, he slapped her hard on the face. This slap was even harder than the previous one. Wang Shi's head hit the edge of the table, and blood immediately flowed out. "Old master! Father! What are you doing?" The three of them screamed in fear. Yi Wenhua stared at Mrs. Wang and said, "Stay in your own room obediently. If you dare to step out of the room, you can get the divorce papers and get out." "Old master!" Wang Shi was so scared that she even forgot to cry. Yi Wenhua stopped talking to her after he finished talking. He looked at Yi Yu and said, "And you, don't be so smart if you don't want to die. Don't drag the Yi family down with you." Yi Yu lowered her eyes and clenched her hands that were hidden in her sleeves. "Father, I know. It's good that you know," Yi Wenhua said in a low voice. Old Madam Yi frowned. She was very unhappy with her son's tough behavior. Yi Wenhua didn't wait for her to finish and said sternly, "Mother, do you really want to see the Yi family die without any descendants?" Old Madam Yi was shocked and said, "How can it be? You are Yi Li's biological father, how dare she?" Yi Wenhua smiled bitterly and said, "Li, may not, but when did Prince Ding really treat me as his father-in-law? Mother, do you know how many people Prince Ding has killed these years? Or do you think that he can't do it?" Old Madam Yi was silent. These years, Mo Xiaoyao had killed many people on the battlefield. Just for Yili alone, how many people had he killed? Thinking of this, old Madame Yi couldn't help but shiver. Yi Wenhua snorted and ignored old Madame Yi, who wanted to say something. He turned around and left. Yili and Mo Xiaoyao walked out of the study and went to the front hall side by side. Yili asked curiously, "What are you going to do with Yi Yu?" It wasn't that she didn't trust Mo Xiaoyao, but it wasn't like Mo Xiaoyao to let her go so easily. Mo Xiaoyao lowered his head and looked at Yili with a gentle smile. "Since she entertained I will let her be happy for 2 days. Yi Yu doesn't look like someone who will leave her fate to fate. She was able to escape from death in the palace, let alone now. And Yi Yu was a smart person. She must have guessed that Mo Xiaoyao wouldn't really let her go. She was afraid that something would happen if she was left alone." Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly and said, "I am afraid that she will leave her fate to fate." That year. Didn't she want to burn Li to death? It's too easy for her to die like this. Li, don't worry about her. Come with I to play with Mo Jingli. He didn't give Yili time to think and pulled Yili to the front yard. Zhuo Jing and Wei Lin, who were following behind them, couldn't help but shiver. They both looked at each other. Was Prince planning to burn Yi Yu alive? If so, they had to sympathize with her. She might as well have been killed by Prince just now. Also, what do you mean by teasing Prince Li? Your Highness, are you sure you're talking about Prince Li and not the little white dog that young Madame Su raised? Chapter 768. In the main hall of the Yi Manor, Mo Jingli sat and drank tea with a gloomy expression. Only his tightly clenched hands showed the anxiety and anger in his heart. After thinking about it all night, he still couldn't relax. He originally wanted to come to the Yi Manor to see if he could get the most important thing from Yi Yu and then find a way to send her out of the city. But he didn't think that he would still be one step too late and let Mo Xiaoyao and Yili beat him to it. No matter how powerful Mo Jingli was in Jiangnan, in Li City, he could only tolerate Mo Xiaoyao's family. It was just like the saying, a strong dragon can't beat a local snake. In the land of the Northwest, no matter how powerful one was, even a tiger had to lie down and a dragon had to coil up. Glancing at the black-clothed guards standing respectfully at the door, Mo Jingli's expression darkened. He finally suppressed the anxiety in his heart. Why has Prince Li come to the Yi Manor so early in the morning? Mo Xiaoyao's voice carried a lazy smile from the door. The corners of Mo Jingli's eyes twitched. He raised his head and saw a pair of shadows walk in hand. His gaze fell on the two holding hands. Mo Jingli's expression became even uglier. He looked at Mo Xiaoyao with a fake smile and said, "Didn't Prince Ding and Princess Ding arrive earlier than I?" Mo Xiaoyao pulled Yili to the main seat and sat down. He smiled and said, Yesterday, someone came to report that the Yi Manor found a fugitive that the Prince Ding mansion has been chasing for many years. I and Princess Li were worried about the safety of the Yi family, so we came early in the morning to take a look. Could it be that Prince Li also received the news?" Mo Jingli said indifferently, "Prince Ding is joking. I haven't heard of it." Mo Jingli laughed coldly in his heart. How could he not understand Mo Xiaoyao? Even if the Yi family died in front of him, he might not even bat an eyelid. Coming up with such a lie was clearly just to brush him off. King Li hasn't told I yet. Why is King Li here so early? Mo Xiaoyao asked in a good mood. Mo Jingli said coldly, "Can't I come to the Yi residence?" Mo Xiaoyao shrugged. "Prince Li is also the son-in-law of the Yi family, so of course he can come." "Whatever, Prince Li is a guest. I don't want others to think that my Prince Ding mansion does not treat guests well." "Then Prince Li, please take a seat. I just obtained something interesting in the residence and was planning to go back and study it." A strange light flashed across Mo Jingli's eyes. He didn't expect Yi Yu to be able to withstand Mo Xiuyao's attacks. But when he heard Mo Xiuyao say this, he couldn't help but feel resentful. If he had known this would happen, he would have taken Yi Yu back to the post house even if Mo Xiuyao found out. The women of the Yi family, other than Yi Li, were all incompetent. After saying this, Mo Xiuyao was no longer in a hurry. He leaned against the chair and played with Yi Li's hair while waiting for Mo Jingli's reaction. In any case, the bargaining chip was in his hands, so he had the final say in the price. From the looks of it, Yi Yu had really given him a big gift. After a long time, Mo Jingli stared at Mo Xiuyao and said in a low voice, "What do you want?" Mo Xiuyao raised his eyebrows in confusion, as if he didn't understand Mo Jingli's meaning. "What does princely mean? I don't understand." Mo Jingli's eyes were filled with anger. He stared fiercely at Mo Xiuyao and said, "What will it take for you to give me the thing you took from Yi Yu?" Yesterday, he had only taken a small portion of it from Yi Yu. After a doctor's examination, it was confirmed that it was the only true antidote that Mo Jingqi had given him. But the amount was so small that it could be ignored. This. Mo Xiuyao looked at Mo Jingli with interest. He was like a cat that had been set on fire, so he was in a good mood. He happily rubbed Yi Li's hair and asked softly, "Li, if there's anything you want, quickly ask Prince Li. Prince Li occupies Jiangnan and is not as barren as the northwest. It's rare that Prince Li is so generous." Yi Li looked at Mo Jingli's angry expression with amusement. She couldn't blame Mo Jingli for being so angry. Any man would be furious if they were caught in such a situation. Of course, Yi Li didn't know that the reason Mo Jingli was so angry was because Yi Li was sitting right in front of them and listening to their conversation. Even though he had been drugged by Mo Jingqi, but no matter what, a man with this kind of problem would always make him feel awkward and unable to raise his head. Especially in front of a woman that he had always wanted. Mo Jingli sat in the chair and panted heavily. His eyes were red as he stared at Mo Xiuyao. If it weren't for the fact that the difference in strength was too great, Yi Li believed that Mo Jingli would definitely pounce on Mo Xiuyao without hesitation. After thinking seriously, Yi Li shook her head slightly and said, "I don't think there's anything I want." For a moment, Yi Li really couldn't think of anything valuable to ask Mo Jingli that Mo Jingli was willing to give. Mo Xiuyao smiled gently and said, "Since Li can't think of anything, then let I think." Yi Li looked at him without commenting. Wasn't he the one who wanted to extort Mo Jingli? Mo Xiuyao rubbed his chin and thought seriously for a moment before saying, "Since Prince Li is so generous, I won't be polite. 1,000 threads snow robe, white jade phoenix zither, 9 dragons nation guarding seal, and Titan Emperor incineration sword. In addition, your nieces and nephews just turned a month old. Prince Li hasn't had time to send gifts. I remember that there's a shop called Agarwood Square. The children there are pretty good. It should be fine, right? Also. Mo Xiuyao." Mo Jingli's eyes were almost bloodshot. His eyes staring at Mo Xiuyao could no longer be described with hatred. It wasn't that Mo Jingli was too stingy, but that Mo Xiuyao was too greedy. That so-called Little Agarwood Square was the most profitable of all of Mo Jingli's private properties. For example, the 4 items he wanted, although they were only 4 items, the value of these 4 items was something that even if the entire treasury of the Chu Imperial Palace was sold, it might not be able to match. The 1,000 threads snow robe was made from the silk of snow silkworms that grew at the peak of the snowy lands. It was said that the number of snow silkworms was extremely small. Only a few of them died in a year. It would take more than 100 years to gather enough silk to weave a single piece of clothing. The snow robe was warm in winter and cool in summer. It was impervious to fire and water. It could be said to be the world's best defensive treasure. Most importantly, the art of weaving silk had long been lost in the world. The one in Dechu State's imperial palace was the only 1,000 thread snow robe in the world. If it hadn't been kept in the Dechu state's imperial palace, it would have caused a bloodbath in the world. The value of the other 3 items was also not below the snow robe. Among them, the incineration sword was said to be the first recorded sword of the Titan Emperor. Not to mention how the sword was still sharp after thousands of years, the sword itself was the symbol of the imperial palace's orthodox lineage. Mo Xiaoyao immediately asked for these 4 items. It could be said that he had dug up more than half of the Dechu state's imperial palace's treasury. This made Mo Jingli's heart ache. His heart was about to break. Moreover, he dared to ask for more. Seeing Mo Jingli bristle with anger, Mo Xiaoyao seemed to be even happier. He calmly continued, also, King Li left behind some things in the north that he didn't dare to leave behind. King Li, do you want to take them back yourself or give them to I? Mo Jingli's pupils shrank. Of course, he understood what Mo Xiaoyao was talking about. Although the Dechu state's imperial court had already moved south, whether it was the Chu capital or the northwest, Mo Jingli still had many spies. And Mo Xiaoyao wanted him to remove all of them. Chapter 769. Don't even think about it. Mo Jingli gritted his teeth. Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows and smiled. King Li doesn't need to be so angry. When giving a gift, it has to be given willingly. If King Li can't bear to part with it, I naturally won't force it. Even though it's a bit of a pity, as long as the item is still there, we'll be able to see it sooner or later, right? Even if Mo Jingli doesn't give it, does it mean I can't get it? Mo Xiaoyao expressed his intentions to Mo Jingli without any hesitation. Mo Jingli was so angry that his face turned white. Helpless, from the start, he was destined to be at a disadvantage in this exchange. Mo Xiaoyao wasn't in a rush. He smiled and said, King Li can go back and think about it before giving I a reply. Ah, right, if King Li is interested in that ye second miss, you can also bring her back. Consider it I's return gift. Mo Jingli's face darkened. He glared fiercely at Mo Xiaoyao before turning and leaving. Compared to what he had lost, even 100 Yiyus couldn't make up for it. What did he want Yiyu for? If he saw Yiyu right now, he would only want to strangle that woman to death. Seeing Mo Jingli leave, Mo Xiaoyao and Yili didn't stay any longer and also left the Yi residence. Seeing that Mo Xiaoyao had a rare smile on his face, Qin Feng and the others behind him couldn't help but put a large distance between them. Yili asked somewhat helplessly, are you really that happy about scheming against Mo Jingli? Mo Xiaoyao disdainfully curled his lips and said, who's happy about that? With Mo Jingli's brain, it's easy for I to scheme against him. Then it's for the treasure. Seeing Mo Jingli's expression, Yili also understood that Mo Xiaoyao's request must be extraordinary. Mo Xiaoyao nodded happily. I have been looking for the snow thread robe for a few years now. Unfortunately, Mo Jingqi had hidden it too well. Even the shadow guard of the Prince Ding mansion could not find the entrance to the imperial palace. There's also the phoenix zither, hee. With it, young Master Qing Chen can at least work for us for another 20 years, right? Mo Xiaoyao held Yili's hand as they walked. He happily discussed with Yili how to use the treasures after they obtained them. The impenetrable snow thread robe would naturally be given to Yili. The phoenix zither would be used to trick young Master Qing Chen into continuing to work for the Prince Ding mansion. As for the kingdom-suppressing seal, it didn't have any practical use. However, it was said that there was a legendary book hidden within it. He could give it to Mr. Qing Yun to study. There was also the incineration sword. Although the Prince Ding mansion had many treasured swords, one of which was personally forged by the founding Prince Ding Mo Lan Yun, the cloud-embracing sword. Although it could not be considered a legendary sword due to its recent age, it was still a rare divine weapon. However, compared to the legendary number 1 sword in the world, it was obviously not enough. Qin Feng and the others who were following behind them had black lines on their faces. Prince Li still hasn't agreed to give it to you. Mo Xiaoyao, who was in an extremely good mood, did not care whether these things were his or not. If he took a fancy to something that was not his, it would become his sooner or later. Lowering his head to look at the beautiful and elegant girl beside him, Mo Xiaoyao's lips curved into a satisfied smile. With the snow thread robe, he would be more assured of Li's safety in the future. Li, let's go shopping. Shopping? Li looked up and asked with some confusion. Other things were fine, but in these past few years, they really did not go shopping. Even if they were free, they would go out of the city for a walk. The most important reason was that Mo Xiaoyao's white hair was too dazzling. Even people who had never seen them before would naturally remember their identity when they saw the white-haired young man in Glass City. Wherever they went, they would be surrounded by people. It was better to go out of the city to a place with fewer people. Mo Xiaoyao smiled and said, Glass City is more lively than usual these days. Li and I worked so hard to manage Glass City. Shouldn't we go and enjoy the people? Let's go. He did not care whether Li agreed or not. He pulled Li and walked in the direction with the most people on the street. The guards following behind saw the prince pull princess into the crowd like the wind and looked at each other. Commander Qin, what do we do? Qin Feng rubbed his chin and said, a few people follow from a distance. Everyone else, go back to your fu. Don't get too close and let the prince and princess find out. It was clear that the prince wanted to spend some time with princess. If they disturbed the prince's mood, they would be the unlucky ones. The guards behind him had bitter smiles. It was a very difficult task to follow the prince and princess without being discovered. The two held hands as they walked in the crowd. As expected, they attracted many people's attention. Not to mention Mo Xiaoyao's white hair that showed his identity, just the two's appearance and aura was enough to attract most people's attention. Even though they were surrounded by people, it was a good thing that Glass City's people were very polite and did not go up to disturb them. But the people of Glass City knew, the people of Dechu State knew, maybe the guests of Xiling and Nanzhao knew, but there were still a few people who did not know their identity. So when the two stood in a newly opened shop that sold goods from the western regions and heard the tall boss of the western regions, who was completely different from the people of the Central Plains, speak to Li in a strange Central Plains accent, Mo Xiaoyao's face instantly turned green. This was a shop that sold all kinds of exquisite jewelry from the western regions. Even though the porcelain and gold products of the Central Plains could be said to be at the peak, the countries of the western regions had unique craftsmanship in gold and stone, especially precious stones, and had a different style. And this young merchant who came all the way to Glass City to open a shop clearly had the genes of a romantic country. When he saw Li come in, he immediately ignored Mo Xiaoyao who was standing beside her and took out the most exquisite jewelry in his shop to curry favor with Li. He also said that if Li liked it, he could give it to her for free. Of course, if the beautiful Miss Dongfang could do him the honor of having afternoon tea with him, that would be even better. In this life, this was the first time someone hit on her like this. Of course, this was also because there were only a few people in this world who were so passionate and unrestrained. Even if there were one or two of them, they would be classified as lechers. Not knowing whether to laugh or cry as she looked at this tall and handsome Western Regions man in front of her. Li shook her head and pulled Mo Xiaoyao who was about to explode out of the shop. The Western Regions merchant behind them held his most exquisite jewelry and felt sad. Why did the beautiful Miss Dongfang pull that white-haired man and leave without looking back? Could it be that white hair was more beautiful than his blonde hair and more attractive? The local waiter of Glass City who was hiding at the side silently watched his boss's suicidal actions. After thinking about it, he decided to tell his boss. After all, although this Western Region's boss who had just arrived was a bit strange, he was still very good to people. If he died in a foreign land because he provoked someone he shouldn't have, that would be too tragic. He went forward and told him about Mo Xiaoyao and Li's identities. He also emphasized that the prince and princess were very close and had a very good relationship. The blonde young man who had just heard this immediately shouted, "You're saying that beautiful miss is a princess?" The waiter nodded and the blonde young man instantly went crazy, "But that miss looks like she's only 15 or 16 years old. I heard that the powerful princess should already be the mother of 3 children." Chapter 770. The shop assistant silently rolled his eyes. "You don't look like you're just 20 years old. People from the West always look old. Anyway, boss, the princess consort is older than you. There are many beautiful ladies in Glass City. You don't provoke the princess consort anymore. You'll die. Even if the prince doesn't kill you, the people of Glass City will kill you." The beautiful love that had just sprouted was cruelly strangled in the beginning by the nameless shop assistant. They were indeed a passionate and unrestrained people. The blonde young man was dispirited for a moment before he became lively again. "Dearly, I just met the highest ruler here. Heavens, I didn't even greet him. That's so rude. Quickly prepare a gift. I want to personally pay him a visit. I heard that your king is a very wise person, although I didn't notice him just now. However, someone who is worthy of the beautiful princess consort should be a good king. He definitely won't mind doing business with me." He was the second son of a wealthy merchant in the West. According to the family's rules, the eldest son could inherit almost all of the family's wealth. The other sons could only inherit a small amount of wealth that was enough for them to live a carefree life or start a business. The young second son of the family took the money and traveled thousands of miles to the east, where the land was said to be filled with gold. Although it wasn't to the point where the land was filled with gold, he felt that he could earn a lot of money here. He could even build a business that didn't belong to his family. Thinking of this, the blonde young man couldn't help but dance with joy. It's so beautiful. Although the beautiful princess consort is already married, the princess consort might still have a younger sister who hasn't married yet. "Lee, you're right. There are many beauties in this city. Yesterday I saw a beautiful lady. Perhaps she isn't married yet and is willing to accept my love." The shop assistant with the surname Lee silently rolled his eyes and turned to prepare the gift. However, he could foresee that his employer would be mercilessly chased out of the Prince Ding mansion. He might even be beaten to death by the people of Glass City for taking liberties with a woman. After leaving the shop, Mo Xiaoyao's expression was still ugly. Yili laughed as she held onto his arm and looked up. "That person looks like he just arrived in the Central Plains and doesn't know the rules of the Central Plains. Why are you angry with him?" Mo Xiaoyao gritted his teeth. "I want to close down his shop and chase him out of Glass City. How dare he covet his Li? I'll make sure he dies." Yili shook her head and said, "He didn't mean that. Maybe it's the nature of their country." Yili could see that the young man didn't mean anything bad. Just like some romantic Western people, when they saw a beautiful girl, they went up to her to express their affection. If there was a chance, he might develop further. Most of the time, it would just be a cup of tea. Mo Xiaoyao snorted lightly. Of course, he could see the sincerity and pure admiration in that person's eyes. But even so, he was still unhappy. "Well, let him be. Didn't you say you were going shopping with me? How can you go shopping with such a sullen face?" Yili said with a smile. It was rare for him to go out with Li, so Mo Xiaoyao naturally didn't want to spoil the mood. Only then did he throw the matter to the back of his mind and walk with Yili in the crowd. On the busiest street in Glass City, in a tea house on the side of the street, one could clearly see the situation on the street through the open windows. Inside the window, a few men and women with extraordinary appearances sat facing each other. Beside Ren Qining sat Queen Helan and Imperial concubine Yun, and opposite Yelu Yi sat Qing Yaina, who still had a veil on her face. The women of the northern region had always been straightforward. Queen Helan looked down on imperial concubine Lu, who was secretive and looked down on everyone with a pair of cold eyes. Pursing her bright red lips, she said with a smile, "Seventh Prince, when did you northern tribes women learn the pretentious ways of the Central Plains?" As she spoke, she casually glanced at imperial concubine Yun, who was sitting on the other side of Ren Qining. Clearly, the pretentious words were directed at her. But even the pretentious imperial concubine Yun did not wear a veil on her face. Being secretly mocked by Queen Helan, imperial concubine Yun was naturally furious. But she also looked down on the woman in white opposite her. At a glance, she knew that this woman was from the Central Plains. Following the seventh prince of the northern tribes, she even took the name of the northern tribes. She was so secretive that it seemed like she could not be seen. She actually dared to look at her with that kind of disdain. Who did she think she was? Sister Queen, you're wrong. Although the women of the Central Plains are not as straightforward and generous as the women of the northern region, they are also open. Except for unmarried daughters, no one hides their heads and shows their tails. If she was an unmarried woman, she naturally should not follow a man everywhere. Since she followed a man everywhere, what was the point of covering her face? Imperial concubine Lu was mercilessly mocked by these two women, and her cold eyes seemed to freeze. King of the northern region, are the women in your palace all fond of gossiping? Or did Mo Xiaoyao kill all the women of your northern region before bringing these two women out to make a fool of yourself? As soon as these words came out, not only Queen Helan and imperial concubine Yun, but also Ren Qining's expression changed. He stared at imperial concubine Lu for a long time with gloomy eyes, and then said to Yelu Yi lightly, "Brother Yelu, your fiancé is interesting." This time, it was imperial concubine Lu's turn to look ugly. Just like how she disdained to quarrel with Queen Helan and imperial concubine Yun and directly talked to Ren Qining. Ren Qining ignored her and directly talked to Yelu Yi, which also showed that he disdained to argue with a woman. Yelu Yi vaguely gave imperial concubine Lu a warning look. Although imperial concubine Lu was angry, she could only secretly suppress the anger in her heart. Queen Helan looked at Yelu Yi, then looked at imperial concubine Lu, and said with a smile, "I am indeed not as good as my cousin, but I am still presentable, right? Seventh Prince, there are still many suitable women in the northern region who are suitable to be wives. Your woman is not good." Imperial concubine Yun did not care about the fight with Queen Helan at this time, and asked gloatingly, "What's not good about her?" "I think this girl is very beautiful. She is too old. A woman of this age in the northern region can be a grandmother," Queen Helan said without any trace of politeness. The women of the northern tribes married at an earlier age than the women of the Central Plains. There were really many women of imperial concubine Lu's age who could be a grandmother or grandmother. No matter how beautiful imperial concubine Lu was, some traces of age could not be concealed. Chapter 771. Age was definitely the most untouchable taboo for every woman, especially for a stunning beauty who was no longer young. A beauty in her twilight years and a general with white hair was the most helpless thing in the world. Therefore, even the arrogant noble consort Lu, who was unwilling to lower herself to the level of a foreign woman like Queen Helan, was still enraged. "Bitch, what did you say?" Noble consort Lu was trembling with anger as she glared at Queen Helan and snapped. Queen Helan was only 16 or 17 years old this year. She was really at the age of a flower. Although she didn't have the delicate and fair complexion of the women of the Central Plains, her young complexion still looked healthy and delicate under the sun. This was exactly what noble consort Lu lacked at her age. No matter how exquisite her makeup was, no matter how hard she tried to maintain her youthful skin in her 30s, she would never have the tender skin of a young girl. What's more, she had suffered for a long time in the past 2 years, which almost made her years of maintenance go to waste. Although she had tried her best to maintain herself in the past 2 years, her complexion could never return to its peak. Queen Helen's words undoubtedly sprinkled a handful of salt on her wound mercilessly. Presumptuous. Queen Helen's face darkened. She raised her chin and stared at noble consort Lu proudly. Seeing that you are Prince Yelu's woman, I will yield to you. Believe it or not, I will smash your face and you won't be the royal consort of the northern tribes. I don't believe that the king of the northern tribes will make trouble for me because of this. Noble consort Lu glared at Queen Helen as if poisoned. Yelu Yi frowned and said in a deep voice, "All right, Queen Helen." Qing Yaina spoke without thinking, "Please forgive her. However, you also spoke rudely first. Why don't we just let it go?" Queen Helen glanced at Ren Qining, who obviously didn't intend to stand up for her, snorted and turned her head away without speaking. Noble consort Lu was originally unwilling, but under Yelu Ye's warning gaze, she gave up. "Hey, isn't that Prince Ding and Princess Ding?" Queen Helen looked out of the window and saw Mo Xiaoyao and Yili strolling hand in the crowd. In the crowd of black-haired people, Mo Xiaoyao's white hair was naturally very conspicuous. Hearing this, the others also looked over. Sure enough, he saw an outstanding man and woman walking side by side in the crowd. The two of them held hands as they chatted and laughed. Mo Xiaoyao was wearing a light green robe with silver embroidery. A jade belt was tied around his waist, and his long silver hair was casually draped over his shoulders. He lowered his head and looked at the black-haired woman beside him. His light laughter was completely different from his usual indifference and coldness. The woman standing beside him had black hair that was tied up in a loose bun. She casually dabbed a purple-stamped hibiscus flower, and a delicate silver dangling hairpin gently swayed beside her ear, which made her beautiful face even more elegant and graceful, causing people to be unwilling to look sideways. Yi Li was wearing a very simple white robe with silver embroidery, and a light purple jade pendant was tied to her silver belt. The two of them were obviously not dressed formally, but as they walked in the crowd, everyone's eyes couldn't help but follow them. It wasn't clear what Mo Xiaoyao said, but Yi Li angrily glared at him. She raised her hand to snatch the thing in his hand, but Mo Xiaoyao let her pass with a smile. He held her waist with one hand and brought the thing in his hand to her lips with the other. Only then did the crowd see clearly that Mo Xiaoyao was holding a stick of candied haws. Ren Qining and Yelu Yi couldn't help but twitch their mouths. With their status, no matter which woman they doted on, they would never do such a thing. But seeing Mo Xiaoyao do it so calmly and without any pretense, it was obvious that he was enjoying it. I've long heard that Prince Ding and Princess are deeply in love. Seeing it today, I know that the rumors are true. Imperial concubine Yun sighed faintly, and it was difficult to hide her envy for Princess Ding in her tone. Queen Helen also rarely agreed with Imperial concubine Yun's words. Prince Ding is an amazing man. Yelu Ye's mouth twitched. The standard of a good man was to buy candied haws on the street? Seeing his indifference, Queen Helen said unhappily, "Seventh Prince, can you buy candied haws on the street for any woman?" Yelu Yi curled his lips in disdain. How could he, a prince, do such a degrading thing for a woman? Queen Helen was even more disdainful. I originally thought that only the men of the Central Plains were so hypocritical, but I didn't expect you northern tribes people to be the same. The men of the northern region are not as hypocritical as you. Every one of them is a good man like Prince Ding. Seeing that Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li were about to pass by downstairs, Queen Helen stood up and said with a smile, "Prince Ding, Princess Ding." Downstairs, Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao looked up and saw Queen Helen waving happily at them. Of course, there was also Ren Qining and Yelu Yi, whose expressions were not very good. Ren Qining and Yelu Yi had formed an alliance to fight against the Mahist army, so it was not surprising that the two of them would appear at the same tea house. But the two families had colluded under the eyes of the Mahist army in Li City. They really did not put the Prince Ding mansion in their eyes. Yi Li's lips curled into a faint smile. She nodded at Queen Helen and said with a smile, "The Queen is also here, what a coincidence." Queen Helan leaned against the window and said with a smile, Prince Ding and Princess Fei are out shopping, why don't you come up and sit together? Deference is no substitute for obedience. Yili smiled and agreed. She pulled Mo Xiuyao into the tea house. The two had just entered when the shopkeeper of the tea house came up to greet them with an excited expression. Even though Prince Ding and Princess Fei lived in Li City, the two usually did not go out. It was no wonder that the shopkeeper was so excited that they could visit this small tea house. Looking at the excited and bewildered shopkeeper, Yili nodded with a smile and said, Shopkeeper, don't mind us, we can go up ourselves. The shopkeeper naturally nodded and carefully snuck a glance at Prince Ding, who was standing next to Princess Fei. The prince holding the candied haws was really beyond the scope of what normal people could accept. He didn't dare to go up and make small talk. He could only watch as Yili pulled Mo Xiuyao upstairs. Ren Qining's group did not sit in the side room, but the shopkeeper knew that their status was special. The place where they sat had the best view and the quietest place in the entire tea house. Separated by a folding screen of mountains and rivers, it formed a world of its own. It had the meaning of finding peace in the midst of chaos. Seeing the two come in hand, Ren Qining and Yelu Ye's gaze involuntarily landed on Mo Xiuyao's other hand. Even though the candied haws were gone, Prince Ding, who was holding the dessert box in his hand, was still unbearable. This feeling was like a deity worshipped by all living beings in the ninth heaven, but someone suddenly told you that deities also needed to eat, drink, and defecate. Facing Ren Qining and Yelu Ye's strange gazes, Mo Xiuyao did not care. He casually put the dessert on the table. Only then did everyone see the words, Tasting Lotus House, on the box. This was Li City's most famous dessert. Queen Helan's eyes lit up. This is Tasting Lotus House's dessert? Their desserts are the best. I went there twice and had to wait in a long line. Chapter 772. Mo Xiuyao and Yili obviously didn't need to line up. Even if they were willing, the customers in front of them would immediately give up their seats. Mo Xiuyao smiled faintly, not bad, Li also likes it. If the queen likes it, you can try it. Queen Helan didn't hold back and said with a smile, then many thanks to Prince Ding. Prince Ding really is a good person. Everyone present couldn't help but twitch. Prince Ding was a good person. How many bad people were there in this world? As if she didn't see the expressions of others, Queen Helan happily ate the desserts. Of course, she wouldn't forget to give half to the original owner of the desserts. In just a few short years, Glass City has become so prosperous. Prince Ding and Princess Consort are truly good at governing. Yelu Yi said in a low voice. Yelu Yi had attended Mo Xiaobao's full moon celebration, so he naturally saw the changes in Glass City. Just the area alone had more than doubled. Not to mention, now that the Emperor of Xiling City and the Chu capital had declined, Glass City could be said to be the most prosperous city in the world. The northern tribes were barren and the northern tribes' people lived by water and grass. Even if there were a few cities, they weren't large. Even the most prosperous royal house of the northern tribes couldn't compare to a second-rate city in the Central Plains. Therefore, the prosperity of the Central Plains made the northern tribes' people envious. Although the northern tribes had many cities that they had seized from the Dechu state, the northern tribes' people were brave and invincible in war, but governing a country wasn't something that could be trusted just by fighting. In Yelu Ye's hands, the city that was originally considered to be in a good condition was now in a state of decline, like the sun setting in the west. Mo Xiuyao said faintly, Seventh Prince is overpraising. Compared to the Chu capital and Jiangnan, the northwest is still very barren. I am just doing my best. The two men didn't think much of his modesty. No matter how prosperous and rich Mo Jingli was in Jiangnan, there was nothing to worry about. But Mo Xiuyao was different. At least in the short term, no one dared to take anything from him. Although these days in Glass City, in order to avoid suspicion and show respect to the master, the nobles of the various countries did not interact much. However, they all had their own sources of information. At the very least, the West Hill, which had lost a large amount of land but had recovered it from the Dechu state, had no intention of provoking Imo Xiuyao for the time being. Lei Jinting focused his attention on Imo Jingli of Jiangnan instead. If that was the case, they would have to think twice before going against Imo Xiuyao. After all, regardless of whether they could win or not, if they ended up benefiting others, then the losses would outweigh the gains. As for Yelu Yi, for the time being, he no longer had any plans to start a war with Imo Xiuyao. Within the northern militant kingdom, there was news that his brother, the crown prince, was on the move. In addition, during this period of time, the battle with the Mahist army had been intense. This made his mind, which had been blinded by victory, clear up a little. If his brother, the crown prince, gained the upper hand within the kingdom, then even if he defeated Imo Xiuyao once or twice, it would be of no use. Unless he could completely wipe out the Mahist army, otherwise it would just be a waste of his own strength. Thinking about how Yelu Hang's relationship with the Prince Ding mansion was much more harmonious than his own, Yelu Ye's heart moved slightly. Looking at Imo Xiuyao, his gaze became more clear and deep. Prince Ding, I have a business deal that I would like to discuss with Prince Ding. What do you think? Business deal? Imo Xiuyao seemed to have heard a joke. Seventh Prince, your northern militant army is still eyeing the border like a tiger watching its prey. What business deal do you want to discuss with I? Yelu Yi smiled carelessly. There is a saying in the Central Plains, there are no eternal friends, only eternal benefits. At the same time, there are no eternal enemies, right? Imo Xiuyao raised his eyebrows. That seems to make sense. Why don't Seventh Prince say it? Ren Qining, who was sitting opposite, saw that Yelu Yi wanted to discuss a business deal with Imo Xiuyao in front of him. His face immediately turned ugly. After all, the northern region and the northern militant army were allies. Yelu Yi, of course, would not offend Ren Qining. He smiled and said, in fact, this matter is beneficial to everyone. I wonder if the northern region king is interested. Ren Qining said indifferently, I'm all ears. Beside them, Queen Helan frowned. What's wrong with you men? Didn't you say that you came out to play? Now that you're sitting together, you're talking about these annoying things. I don't want to listen to your nonsense. Hearing this, Ren Qining frowned in displeasure. In that case, the queen should return to the post house first. Return what? I haven't had enough fun yet. Queen Helan unceremoniously refuted his words, which succeeded in making Ren Qining's face even uglier. Yi Li stood up and said with a faint smile, in that case, why don't Queen Helan come out with me for a walk, so that this consort can show her hospitality? Queen Helan's eyes lit up. She happily stepped forward and pulled Yi Li's arm. Where is the princess taking me to play? There are so many people in Glass City, so many interesting things. I want to buy some more. Yi Li smiled. When the queen leaves, I'll have someone send you whatever the queen likes. Princess Ding, you're really a good person. Let's go. After saying that, she did not care about the other people's reactions and hurriedly pulled Yi Li downstairs. Yi Li waved her hand at Imo Xiuyao, indicating that it was fine, and followed Queen Helan downstairs. Imo Xiuyao frowned. From the window, he watched the guards waiting outside the tea house follow them up. Only then did he feel relieved and sit back down. Prince Ding's affection for the princess is really enviable. Noble consort Lu stared at Imo Xiuyao and gritted her teeth. Looking at Imo Xiuyao, who was still handsome and had white hair, she felt awe-inspiring. Noble consort Lu's heart felt as if it was bitten by a poisonous snake. Imo Xiuyao was 1 or 2 years older than her. If the two looked about the same age 2 years ago, now if noble consort Lu took off her veil, even if she was still beautiful, she seemed to be a few years older than Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Xiaoyao acted as if he didn't hear. He lowered his head and took a sip of tea. He said to Yelu Yi, "What is the deal, Prince Yelu, please say it." The woman who was ignored, even the beautiful face under her face was twisted and ferocious. In another jewelry store in the city not far from the tea house, Yi Li and Queen Helan sat across from each other in a quiet room on the second floor. Yi Li leisurely tasted the new tea that the shopkeeper had personally delivered, smiling as she watched Queen Helan curiously play with the various exquisite jewelry on the table. After a while, Yi Li asked softly, "Does Queen Helan have something to say to this consort?" Hearing this, Queen Helan put down the jewelry in her hand and raised her head. The arrogant and curious smile on her face gradually disappeared. It was replaced by the determination rarely seen in women of the Central Plains and the wisdom and calmness rarely seen in women of the northern region. The sudden change made the originally arrogant young woman look a little more imposing. Queen Helan nodded and said with a smile, "I knew I couldn't hide it from Princess Ding." Yi Li smiled and said, "The queen showed goodwill to this consort on the first day. If this consort couldn't see through it, wouldn't I disappoint the queen? It's just that I don't know what matter the queen wants to discuss in private without the northern region king." Queen Helan looked deeply at Yi Li and said in a deep voice, "I want to cooperate with King Ding's mansion." "No, it should be. We, the people of the northern region, want to cooperate with the Prince Ding mansion." Chapter 773. People from the northern region. Yi Li paused for a moment and said, "Isn't it the northern region?" There were now two kinds of people in the northern region, the native people of the northern region and the Central Plains people who claimed to be the survivors of the previous dynasty. These so-called survivors of the previous dynasty were just the people of Dechu state who had turned to Ren Qining or had been taken in by him in recent years. Ren Qining trusted the Central Plains people more. If he wanted to restore the orthodoxy of the previous dynasty, he would have to suppress the people of the northern region and even abandon them completely in the end. Otherwise, his so-called orthodoxy of the Central Plains would not live up to its name and would not be accepted by the Central Plains literati. Unless he was willing to use the northern region as the country's name and rule the Central Plains as a foreign race. But in this way, not only would he be resisted several times or even hundreds of times more than before. Even the Central Plains people who were originally loyal to him might betray him. From the very beginning, there had been irreconcilable contradictions between the two tribes. That was why Mr. Qingyun told Ren Qining that he was wrong from the beginning. After pondering for a moment, Yi Li asked curiously, "Can Queen Helan make such a decision?" Queen Helan raised her head and said proudly, "Since I'm here, I can naturally make the decision. Our northern region is not like your Central Plains, who only lock their daughters in their boudoirs. We can do what men can do. Our family has always had few children, and I have no brothers or sisters. After my father passes away, I should take over the position of patriarch. And after my cousin passes away, according to the rules, her family should be replaced by me or my children. But those annoying Central Plains people around Ren Qining control the rights of the people of the northern region. We just want to take back what belongs to us." Yi Li had considered doing something through Queen Helan, but she did not expect the young Queen Helan to be such an important person. She was a little surprised for a moment, but she had always been calm, so Queen Helan naturally could not see through her thoughts. Yi Li looked at her and said softly, "I heard that the former queen of the northern region was also a beautiful woman, but unfortunately, we didn't have the chance to meet." Queen Helan's eyes suddenly turned red at the mention of this. "If it weren't for Ren Qining, how could my cousin have wronged herself like that? My cousin gave up the position of clan leader for him, and he went to guard against my cousin everywhere, letting those women anger her. He even found an opportunity to kill all the people his cousin trusted. If it wasn't for cousin saving him back then, how could this ungrateful bastard be where he is today?" Looking at Queen Helan's angry appearance, Yili sighed in her heart. With Renchining's martial arts and influence, how could he be in danger in a place like the northern region? He was afraid that the encounter back then was a conspiracy. However, Renchining was willing to spend money for his so-called great cause. Queen, I think you should know. Your cousin's death. This wasn't a secret anyway, so Yili thought it was best to make it clear. Otherwise, she didn't want to be stabbed in the back in the middle of a collaboration. Queen Helan said firmly, I know. My father said that these grievances can be put aside for the time being. We people in the northern region are trustworthy. As long as Princess helps us drive Renchining out, we won't go against the Prince Ding mansion. Yili raised her eyebrows and smiled, if so, what benefits can I get? Queen Helan said, the army of the northern region will all return to the original border with the Dechu state. Although your central plains is good, our northern region's White Mountain black water is not bad. We just want to live our own lives. It wasn't that the people in the northern region had no ambition at all, but that the development of the people in the northern region hadn't reached the point where they could bear their ambition. Before Renchining appeared in the northern region was inhabited by tribes. The people in the northern region also lived a life of fishing and hunting. Not to mention that the people in the central plains generally farmed, they didn't even raise horses and sheep like the northern tribes. The residents were naturally very simple, and Renchining brought too many changes. However, not everyone could accept the earth-shaking changes in less than 20 years. From the occasional fighting between tribes in the past to the current fighting with the regular Dechu state and the Mahist army. The people in the northern region suffered the heaviest losses. The people in the northern region were not stupid. It was almost foreseeable that if this continued, even if Renchining really unified the world one day, the people in the northern region would probably die out. Therefore, they decided to drive Renchining and his cronies out and take back the rights that belonged to the people in the northern region. Perhaps one day, they would also participate in this battle for supremacy, but that was a matter for a very, very long time in the future. It was definitely not now. Yili was silent for a long time before she nodded and said, Queen Helan's proposal is very tempting. If Queen Helan sincerely cooperates, then I think it's possible. Such a straightforward reply made Queen Helan stunned for a moment. In her impression, the people of the Central Plains always liked to think twice before acting. It was rare to see someone as clear-cut as Yili. Princess, can you make the decision? Yili smiled, if I can't make the decision, wouldn't it be a loss for the queen to come to me? Queen Helan was a little apologetic, I originally wanted to ask the princess to pass a message to Prince Ding for me. Moreover, I also heard that the princess is very powerful. Maybe Princess Ding can help me persuade Prince Ding. Prince Ding may not be willing to cooperate with me. You Central Plains people always like women to intervene in these things. Yili smiled and said, I can make the decision. But, the queen has to let me see the sincerity of the northern region, right? Otherwise, how can I trust the queen? Queen Helan nodded and solemnly took out a box and put it in front of Yili, saying, this contains the sacred object of my ancestors in the northern region. With it, you can exchange all the people of the northern region's 26 clans to do one thing for you. As long as you mention it, all the people of the northern region will go through water and tread on fire for you. This is the most honorable treasure of our northern region. For the time being, the princess will keep it. Yili opened the box. The inside of the box was covered with brown patterned animal skin, which looked like the skin of a tiger. There was a short knife on the animal skin. It looked a little rough, but many of the engravings on it had been blurred and rounded. Obviously, it had been there for a long time. The material of the short knife was neither iron nor copper. It was not a common jade knife, but seemed to be made of stone. Although Yili was not superstitious about the binding force of tokens, she also knew that some people believed in the so-called sacred objects. The queen is not afraid that I won't return it? Queen Helan said seriously, if so, the northern region will do everything to bring back the sacred object. But I believe that the princess and Prince Ding are not such people. Yili put away the box and nodded. Tomorrow at the latest, the prince and I will give the queen an answer. Only then did Queen Helan reveal a smile. She nodded and said, "Thank you, Your Highness." Chapter 774. After Yili and Queen Helan finished their discussion and reached a satisfactory agreement, Queen Helan happily followed Yili downstairs with a large pile of adjusted jewelry. After this deep conversation, both of them had a deeper understanding of each other, and their admiration and respect for each other increased. As soon as they went downstairs, they saw Mo Xiaoyao and the others sitting in the parlor downstairs, waiting for them. Not only were Mo Xiaoyao and Ren Qining looking for them, but even Yelu Yi and noble consort Lu were there. Noble consort Lu and consort Yun couldn't help but have a strange look in their eyes when they saw Queen Helan holding boxes of various sizes and wearing exquisite jewelry on the flying fairy bun, which was very popular among the women of the Central Plains. Fenghua Building was originally a property under the Prince Ding Mansion, and it was also one of the best jewelry shops in the entire Dechu state. The things it made were naturally exquisite, and there was no woman who didn't like to tidy them up. Seeing them come down, Mo Xiaoyao stood up and stepped forward to take Yili's hand. He smiled at Queen Helan and said, "It seems that the queen is very satisfied with the jewelry here." Queen Helan smiled happily and said, "Yes, the jewelry of the Central Plains is really beautiful. Princess Ding said that you can give these to me. Is it true?" Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly and said, "Since Princess Li said so, of course it's possible. It's Princess Ding's honor that the queen likes them." Queen Helan held the boxes in her hands, her fondness overflowing in her words. "Then I won't be polite. Thank you, Prince Ding and Princess." "You're welcome, Queen." Yili smiled as she watched the two of them exchange greetings. She asked in confusion, "Why are you here?" Mo Xiaoyao said softly, "I heard that you came to Fenghua Building, so I came to wait for you." "Why is Queen Helan the only one to choose? Didn't Princess Li like anything?" Yili waved her hand and said, "I can't use those. Let's leave them first." She did have a lot of jewelry, but she didn't really use many of them. Many of them were placed there as decorations or given away. Mo Xiaoyao didn't care and said with a smile, "A few days ago, Fenghua Building found a very good piece of white jade. I'll make a hairpin for you later." Prince Ding was so gentle and considerate that the women standing next to him were envious and jealous. Imperial concubine Yun could not help but praise, "Prince Ding and Princess really have a good relationship. Your Majesty, don't you think so?" She nodded her head. Princess Ding Mansion, Queen, and Queen Helan, Princess Helan and consort. I have many beautiful pearls. I'll get someone to send them to you later, okay? The beautiful C was CC. Beautiful she, beautiful of course, some. Yili didn't hold back and said with a smile, "Then many thanks to Queen Helan." Ren Qining left with Princess Helan and consort Yun. Noble consort Lu, who wanted to say something, was also taken away by Yelu Yi. Mo Xiaoyao and Yili happily walked out of Fenghua Building and headed in the direction of Princess Ding. Just by looking at the happy expressions on their faces, it was clear that both sides were very satisfied with this negotiation. Before they reached the entrance of the Prince Ding mansion, they heard that it wasn't as quiet and solemn as usual. Instead, it was a little noisy. Walking forward, they saw a very familiar figure. The golden-haired young man also saw them and immediately flashed his bright white teeth, running toward them. "Beautiful princess consort, it's great to see you here." Mo Xiaoyao's face was gloomy. "Is that so? I don't think it's good. What are you doing at the Prince Ding mansion? It's best if you're here to cause trouble. I will have a reason to arrest you, then." Mo Xiaoyao's mind darkly filled in all kinds of ways to torture people. Although the golden-haired man couldn't see Mo Xiaoyao's thoughts, his intuition still made him tremble and turn toward Yili. Yili smiled helplessly. Who are you? What business do you have at the Prince Ding mansion? The golden-haired man smiled excitedly. Of course there's business. I'm a merchant from the western region's Jialan country. My name is Lance. I want to do business with the owner of this city. Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows and said indifferently, aren't you doing business in Glass City right now? Or do you have something special to sell to I? The golden-haired man shook his head. No, I want to do a very, very big business. There are many magical things in the east. I want to sell them to the west even further away. When I was young, I went there with my father. The people there have a lot of gold, but they don't have beautiful silk, beautiful porcelain, or magical tea. If I sell my country, I'll quickly become a rich man. At least the golden-haired man knew how to read people's expressions. Seeing that Mo Xiaoyao's expression wasn't very good, he added, of course, there's also you. We'll all become the richest people. When he spoke excitedly, the golden-haired man began to dance with his hands and feet. Mo Xiaoyao and Yili exchanged glances. The Prince Ding mansion was very rich, but they didn't mind having more money. After all, fighting wars and raising an army had always been a money-burning job. Why don't you come in with us and we can talk about it in detail? Yili said with a faint smile. Of course, it's my honor. Beautiful princess. The golden-haired man said happily. His employee had warned him that he might be kicked out, but he was very lucky to get a chance on the first try. The heavens really favored those who were diligent and knew how to seize opportunities. The young man thought happily. He seemed to see countless glittering gold waving at him. Beautiful. Mo Xiaoyao, who was walking in front, sneered. He waved his hand to summon the guards. Call Han Mingyue and Han Mingxi over. And young Master Qingchen, let them deal with this guy. The young merchant from the western region called Lance followed the guards into the large Prince Ding's residence with a face full of excitement. The white-haired monarch told him that he didn't know much about business, so he had to wait for someone to come and talk to him. He also suggested that he stroll around the mansion's garden. This made Lance's impression of Prince Ding rise exponentially. After seeing countless superiors who pretended to know what they didn't know, this monarch who had the courage to admit his weakness was so great. No wonder this city was more prosperous and stable than any other city he had ever seen. In June, the Prince Ding mansion was still full of flowers. Lance curiously looked at these flowers unique to the east, and wondered if he could bring them back to the western regions to plant. Just as he was admiring the beautiful scenery in the garden, he saw two people walking towards him. The two figures, one red and one white, were particularly eye-catching in the garden full of blooming flowers. Lance's gaze was firmly fixed on the figure in red. Her tall and slender figure, as well as her beautiful face. Her black hair was casually tied up with a ribbon, and there was a lazy smile on her lips. All of them gave people a strange sense of beauty. Chapter 775. Although she was not as gentle and delicate as the beautiful princess consort, she had a different style. Thus, Lance once again ignored the man in white beside the woman in red and ran over with a flower in his hand. Beautiful Miss Dongfang, may I have the honor of having afternoon tea with you? If you are not married like the beautiful princess consort, please consider accepting my deep love. The two people in front of him were stunned. They were obviously shocked by this sudden display of love. After a while, the woman in red asked in a low voice, "What did you say?" Lance was stunned. This lady's voice seemed to be worse than the beautiful princess consort's. But a perfect beauty like the princess consort was probably rare. However, this red-clothed beauty was also a rare beauty. If you are not married, please accept my deep love. Lance raised his head and said sincerely. Bang! What answered him was a fierce and heavy punch. Lance was hit so hard that his head was in a daze. He could not react for a moment and shook his head. Beautiful little, bang. Han Mingxi mercilessly punched him, turning the blonde man's original image from a lowly dog into a national treasure. I scared your dog eyes, I am a man. Eh. The Dongfang lady, who was originally aggrieved and too violent, was stunned. Then he looked seriously at Han Mingxi's red clothes and handsome face. Only then did he notice that this beauty in red was about the same height as him. And, Han Mingyue next to him looked at her angry brother, then looked at the blonde man with a pair of panda eyes. She could not help but lower her head and laugh. Brother! Han Mingxi flew into a rage out of humiliation. He broke free from Han Mingyue's hand. Don't stop me, I want to kill him. Alright, he is probably a guest of the Prince Ding mansion. You can just punch him a few times to vent your anger. Isn't Princess Ding still waiting for you to discuss matters? Han Mingyue advised. After listening to her brother's words, Han Mingyue angrily gave up the plan to continue beating Lance. She fiercely threw a sharp glare at him and went to Yi Li's study. Lance, who was following behind, looked dispirited. He actually confessed to a man. Just the thought of it gave him goosebumps. Shaking, Lance decided to follow his employee's advice and asked the matchmaker to introduce him to a gentle and beautiful lady as a wife. The East was too scary. He couldn't tell the difference between men and women. The worst thing was that they all had long hair. Poor Lance would never know why he was punched twice. In Yi Li's study, when Han Mingxi and the others arrived, Mo Xiaoyao and Su Qingchen were already there. Seeing Lance's new look, Yi Li was a little stunned. Similarly, when Lance saw Su Qingchen, who was more handsome than Han Mingxi, and then looked at Han Mingxi, who was still waiting for him fiercely, he blinked and lowered his head. Looking at his pitiful eyes, young Master Qingchen's mouth twitched, and he raised his eyebrows doubtfully. No one saw that someone sitting next to Yi Li lowered his head to drink tea, with a triumphant smile on his lips. Although Lance's matter was very important, it didn't mean much to Prince Ding at present. Even if he cooperated with Lance, he wouldn't be able to see the benefits in a short time. So after briefly explaining the plan, this matter was directly handed over to Han Mingxi to deal with. All these years, Han Mingyue had been hanging around in a lukewarm manner. Mo Xiaoyao didn't mean to pay attention to him. Anyway, if Han Mingxi was in trouble, Han Mingyue would naturally solve it for him. Although he didn't have much friendship with Han Mingyue, at least Han Mingyue's brain was very good. If he could use it for free, why not? After dismissing Han Mingxi and the other two, Mo Xiaoyao and the other two sat down to discuss business again. After listening to Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li's description of today's trip, young Master Su's attention was focused on the phoenix zither that had yet to be obtained, and not the fact that Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li had schemed against several people at once. He stared at Mo Xiaoyao and asked, "Will Mo Jingli really give it to you?" Losing the Chu capital was already humiliating enough. If he also lost the Dechu state's national treasure, Mo Jingli's face as the Prince Regent would really be trampled under everyone's feet. Mo Xiaoyao smiled complacently, compared to a few inanimate objects that can't be eaten and can't be used. Isn't it more important to have a healthy son? Young Master Qingchen was silent for a while. As expected, Mo Jingli didn't want to be a righteous person. Give me the phoenix zither. Mo Xiaoyao's smile became even more cheerful. Brother Su, this is the Dechu state's national treasure. Even if it's you, I can't just give it to you casually, right? Su Qingchen looked at him indifferently. Do you know how to play the zither? A little. Compared to young Master Qingchen, Prince Ding's zither skills could only be said to be a little. Besides, Prince Ding's interest wasn't in the zither. Naturally, he didn't care whether the zither in his hands was a newly crafted one or a famous one that had been handed down for generations. But it was different for young Master Qingchen. The white jade phoenix zither was probably more attractive to young Master Qingchen than a peerless beauty. Young Master Qingchen was smart. How could he not understand Mo Xiaoyao's meaning? He snorted lightly and no longer mentioned the zither. Just because he couldn't get it didn't mean that others couldn't either. Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows and smiled at Su Qingchen. Although he couldn't guarantee that others couldn't get it, he could guarantee that young Master Qingchen wouldn't be able to touch it. Seeing the murderous look between the two, Yili helplessly interrupted, "Let's wait for Mo Jingli to deliver the item first." "Big brother, Xiaoyao, shouldn't we talk about the people in Glass City first?" Su Qingchen also didn't want to continue arguing with Mo Xiaoyao on this matter. Either way, everyone had to rely on their own abilities. He lowered his eyebrows and thought for a while before saying, "So, the northern tribes want to negotiate peace with us. It would be best if we could form an alliance to deal with Xiling and Yeluhong together. Does Yeluyi think that the people in the Prince Ding mansion are all idiots?" If it was in the past, Yeluyi would have believed this suggestion. But after the Mahist army took over the emperor of Xiling city, the area that was originally connected to the northern tribes now belonged to the Prince Ding mansion. This meant that the northern tribes and Xiling's plans wouldn't clash at all. As the saying goes, befriend the distant and attack the nearby. Yeluye's actions were meaningless and wouldn't benefit the northern tribes at all. Mo Xiaoyao laughed. "Does he think that we're all idiots?" "I'm guessing that such an idiotic idea wasn't thought of by Yeluyi himself. But this summer, the northern tribes suffered from a drought and the area they took over in the north was full of war. There's less than a tenth of their food left. It's not hard to understand why Yeluyi wants to make a deal with the Prince Ding mansion. If he could control the northern tribes' food, he would immediately have the upper hand in the battle with Yeluhong. Unfortunately, the prince has already decided to help Yeluhong." Su Qingchen smiled faintly. "How should we calculate it? Yeluhong is also the son-in-law of the Central Plains. As long as Princess Ronghua is the crown princess, I don't mind helping him." Mo Xiaoyao laughed. Chapter 776. Su Qingchen raised an eyebrow. "Is this your condition with Yeluhong?" Mo Xiaoyao shook his head. "It's good that everyone knows about this. It won't be pleasant to bring it up." Su Qingchen nodded. "What about the north? Does Queen Helan have confidence in defeating Ren Qining?" Yili smiled. "Based on the fact that Ren Qining still hasn't seen Queen Helan's true colors, I think it's worth a gamble. There was nothing to lose if they lost." Su Qingchen nodded, thinking, if that's the case, we have to guard against Yeluyi and Ren Qining joining hands. The alliance between the two sides was only a temporary cooperation to take down Chu Jing. Once Chu Jing was taken down, it was only a matter of time before they turned hostile. But if the Mahist army chose to help Yeluhong and Queen Helan, then the alliance between the two would be even more solid. Mo Xiaoyao said indifferently, "It doesn't matter. In any case, I don't intend to let them go. The northern tribes' army that entered the Chu state and the Mahist army would have a life and death battle sooner or later. As for Ren Qining, who wanted to restore his country, he wouldn't let him go either." Su Qingchen nodded. "It's good that you know. I'll talk to second uncle about Yeluhong. I'll have to trouble Li, to deal with Queen Helan." Yili smiled. "It's my duty. There's no need to trouble big brother. What do you plan to do with Yi Yu from the Yi family?" Su Qingchen asked with a frown. Su Qingchen didn't have a good impression of the Yi family. Especially this Yi Yu. Even if she was coerced, it didn't change the fact that she had murdered Yi Li. Even a scholarly family like the Su family was very clear about who was close and who was distant. In the eyes of the Su family, Yi Li was a million times more important than the unrelated Yi Yu. In the past, he had thought that Yi Yu was dead. Now that she had appeared in Glass City perfectly fine and was unwilling to give up and continue to monopolize it, young Master Qingchen could no longer tolerate this. She was even a little displeased with Mo Xiaoyao, who had handled this matter so neatly. Mo Xiaoyao smiled leisurely. Don't worry, someone will help us get rid of her. A sharp glint flashed through his smiling eyes. How could he let go of someone who had once wanted to hurt Ali? In the most remote room of the Yi residence, Yi Yu sat on the edge of the bed, lost in thought. She knew that being discovered by the Prince Ding mansion meant that all her plans had come to an end. But she really couldn't accept it. After so many years, she had suffered so much to get to where she was today. In order to avoid being investigated by the Prince Ding mansion, she carefully endured and did not allow herself to reveal any traces of her past resemblance to Yi Yu. It wasn't easy for her to endure until now. Yi Yu felt a little regretful. If he hadn't tried to cheat, if he had directly gone to Jiangnan. Perhaps he could arrive safely, and perhaps he wouldn't be discovered by the Empress Dowager's people. Unfortunately, it was too late for regrets now. Yi Yu. A cold voice entered her ears. Yi Yu was stunned. She turned around and saw Mo Jingli standing at the door. Prince Li, why are you here? Yi Wenhua had already ordered people to guard the door and courtyard. Other than her mother who brought her food, no one was allowed to enter. Mo Jingli stared at her coldly. I can come in if I want to. Yi Yu was delighted. Are you here to take me away from here? Mo Jingli stared at her. Where is the medicine I want? Yi Yu's expression changed slightly. She forced a smile and said, we agreed that after we arrived in Jiangnan. I would only give it to you after the matter was done. Mo Jingli flung her back onto the bed. You gave the medicine to Mo Xiaoyao, didn't you? Yi Yu's expression changed when she heard this. Mo Jingli was furious. Bitch! He had only come with a glimmer of hope, but when he heard the truth, he couldn't hold back his anger. Everything was ruined by this bitch. Because of her cleverness, he had to pay 10 or even 100 times the price to get what was originally within his reach. Prince Li. Yi Yu called out. Mo Jingli was indeed very irritable. Do you know what Mo Xiaoyao asked me for? The 4 treasures of the nation. It's because of you. Yi Yu was dizzy from Mo Jingli pulling on her clothes. The 4 treasures of the nation. She knew that they were the 4 most precious treasures in the Chu Palace. She had wanted to take a look at them when she was the most favored. She had only mentioned them once, and Mo Jingqi had scolded her for half a month. It was said that even the most favored noble consort Lu didn't have the chance to see them. In the past few years, the treasures represented not only the value of cities, but also the face and dignity of the Dechu state's imperial family. Yi Yu knew that Mo Jingli hated her to the core right now. She quickly said, Prince Li, take me away from here. Even if you don't have them. I can help you deal with the Empress Dowager. Mo Jingli sneered, deal with the Empress Dowager. Do I need you to personally deal with I? Who do you think you are? I realized, the reason why I couldn't get anything from you before was because I was too gentle with you. I won't make that mistake again. Tell me everything you know honestly, and I'll let you suffer less. Impossible. Yi Yu gritted her teeth. This was her last and only bargaining chip. If she told him everything, she would die. Mo Jingli revealed a cruel smile, impossible. Gradually, do you think this person is still impossible? He waved his hand, and 2 guards at the door walked in with a child less than 10 years old. My son. Yi Yu turned pale with fright. She had hidden the child very well outside the city. Why? Mo Jingli smiled with satisfaction. Yi Yu, you think too much of yourself. Do you really think that I will help you support this kid to succeed the throne? I hate that I can't kill every one of Mo Jingqi's sons that I see. I'll leave her to you. Get what I want no matter what. With that, Mo Jingli looked at Yi Yu with disgust, then turned and left. In the remote courtyard, the miserable cries of a woman could be heard occasionally. In less than an hour, the guards left inside walked out. In the room, Yi Yu knelt on the ground. Her body was already covered in wounds. She quietly hugged the dying child in her arms and couldn't help but burst into tears. At this moment, she really regretted it. If she had stayed in the countryside of her hometown, it would have been better than being poor for the rest of her life. Second sister. At the door, Yi Ying stood gracefully in a light-colored dress. She looked at Yi Yu with a smile in her eyes. Her gaze was tender and touching. Yi Yu came back to her senses. She quickly rushed over and grabbed Yi Ying's hand, saying, help me get a doctor. My child is injured. Yi Ying gently pulled her hand away. A cold smile appeared on her delicate face. Second sister, the prince ordered that no one is allowed to call a doctor. I can't make this decision. Seeing the expression on Yi Ying's face, Yi Yu looked at her gentle and delicate sister in shock. Why? Why? Yi Ying sneered. Second sister, why didn't you think about why when you wanted to get close to the prince? What did you say? Anyway, the prince doesn't favor me. How can you help me when you're here? What do you want to help me with? Is snatching my husband helping me? I didn't. Yi Yu said with difficulty. She had never thought of snatching Mo Jingli. That was just a temporary expedient. Why didn't her sister understand? I'm begging you. He's your nephew. Help me save him. Yi Ying's face showed a trace of resentment. Where did his father take my son? My son's whereabouts are unknown. He can go to hell too. After saying that, Yi Ying pushed Yi Yu away and turned to leave without mercy. Yi Yu wailed weakly. She could only watch as her sister walked further and further away. Chapter 777. Looking at Yi Ying leaving without mercy, Yi Yu wanted to chase after her, but she was in so much pain that she could not move. She could only hug the unconscious child and sob bitterly. If she had not wanted to rely on Mo Jingli to regain a more honorable status, she would not have ended up like this. However, no matter how much regret she had, she couldn't bring herself back to reality. Not long after, a courtyard in the most remote corner of the Yi residence was on fire. In the front yard, Yi Wenhua and Madame Yi were politely sending Mo Jingli out. Although Yi Wenhua was polite on the surface, he wished that Mo Jingli would never come again. Originally, she did not want to agree when Mo Jingli came back and asked to see Yi Yu. However, Madame Yi was not satisfied and agreed to let Prince Li see Yi Yu. At this moment, looking at Mo Jingli's gloomy face and Madame Ye's disappointed face, Yi Wenhua did not know what to say. Master, it's not good. The backyard is on fire. The servant behind him hurriedly caught up and shouted anxiously. Yi Wenhua was stunned and asked, where is the fire? The servant said, It's the courtyard where Prince Li and Princess Consort went. This answer was very strange. If it was the courtyard where Second Miss was locked up, everyone would think that it was related to Mo Jingli. However, the answer was that Prince Li and Princess Consort Li went to the courtyard. Prince Li just came out and the courtyard was on fire. Even a fool would think that Prince Li had something to do with this. Everyone turned around and saw thick smoke billowing out from the backyard. Wang screamed, Yi Wenhua said in a low voice, send someone to put out the fire. After that, he ignored Mo Jingli and bowed to Mo Jingli. Then, he turned and left for the backyard. Wang Shi came back to her senses and followed Yi Wenhua to the backyard. Mo Jingli's eyes darkened as he stood at the entrance. He glanced at Yi Ying beside him and said in a deep voice, return to the post house. Yi Ying nodded obediently. Yes, Prince. In the blink of an eye, the somewhat irritated door suddenly became silent. Old Madame Yi was still in a daze. How could this be? When the news of the fire in the Yi mansion reached the Prince Ding mansion, Mo Xiaoyao just smiled indifferently. Are you sure this time? That woman won't come back to life again, right? Ah Jean, who was standing at the door, nodded seriously and said, Prince, don't worry. Ah Jean personally went to check. It's definitely Yi Yu. Mo Xiaoyao smiled in satisfaction. Very good. You've just returned, and I'm already asking you to do this. Thank you for your hard work. Go back and see Uncle Mo. Ah Jean nodded and turned to leave without asking any more questions. Mo Xiaoyao's calm voice came from behind, you don't have to tell the princess consort about this. Ah Jean paused and then continued to walk out. The prince probably felt that there was no need to tell the princess consort about this kind of small matter. The study was silent. Mo Xiaoyao looked at the letter on the table and showed a trace of a happy smile. At this time, Yili's courtyard was very lively. Not only were there second Madame Su, Qin Zheng and the others, there were also first Madame Su, Empress Hua, Murong Ting and the other womenfolk who were close to Yili, Mo Xiaobao, Leng Junhan, Su Jirue and the twins who just turned 1 month old were also there to join in the fun. There were only 2 days left until Mr. Qingyun's birthday. Li City had already prepared everything that needed to be prepared. For this matter, the Prince Ding mansion had been busy for many days. When it really came to this time, it was rare for them to have some free time. A group of womenfolk gathered at Yi Li's place to visit the 2 babies. The 2 Madame Su held 1 baby in each hand. Looking at the pink and tender babies, they couldn't bear to part with them. The Su family only had 1 child, Su Jirue. When the 2 madams saw the babies, they naturally liked them very much. Moreover, ever since the 2 little things opened their eyes, they were exceptionally obedient and smart. One was happy when he saw people. Although the other was more quiet, he was also very obedient. They were even easier to take care of than Mo Xiaobao when he was young. Even Mo Xiaoyao had to admit that these 2 little guys added together couldn't be compared to Mo Xiaobao when he was young. Good boy. My Xiaolin, He really looks. First Madame Su was especially fond of Xiaolin, Once she held him, she refused to let go. Although he was still a small child, it was clear that Xiaolin, looked more like the Su family. First Madame Su, who had never been able to hold a grandson, naturally liked this smiling little guy. Second Madame Su also liked Xiao Xian, Although she had a grandson, she didn't have a granddaughter. Not to mention a granddaughter, the Su family didn't even have a daughter. Seeing this obedient and beautiful little girl, second Madame Su also fell in love with her. Yili looked at the obedient baby lying in the arms of the 2 Madame Su. She covered her mouth and smiled. Aunts, since you like children, why don't you urge 3rd brother and 4th brother to get married sooner or later? As soon as she said this, Hua Tianxiang and Mo Wuyo, who were sitting next to her, immediately blushed. Mo Wuyo blushed and hid behind Empress Hua. Hua Tianxiang had nowhere to hide. She could only glare at Yili with a red face. Li, you. Qin Zheng covered her mouth and smiled. Li, is right. Tianxiang, I'm waiting for you to enter the Su family to accompany me. Murong Ting hugged her baby son and smiled. Isn't that right? My Junhan is almost 5 years old. You're so shameless. Hua Tianxiang stomped her feet in embarrassment. Second Madame Su was very satisfied with Hua Tianxiang as her future daughter-in-law. Seeing her embarrassed, she quickly said, that's enough. Why are you talking about this in front of their daughter? I've already discussed it with your uncle, grandfather, and Madame Yang. The old duke died for the country, so there's no time to get married during the mourning period. We can only move the wedding to next year. When the time comes, Tianxiang and Wuyo will marry into the Su family. It'll be a good story. Wuyo was still young, but Hua Tianxiang wasn't young. Originally, it would be good if they could get married later during the mourning period. However, at that time, Su Qingfeng would be fighting in the Chu capital. They had no choice but to wait until after the mourning period. Second, Madame Su was originally worried that she couldn't find a suitable daughter-in-law. Now that the candidate had been decided, she wasn't so worried. What's more, after Master Qingyun's birthday banquet, they would start to prepare for the wedding. Slowly and leisurely until next year. Empress Hua looked lovingly at her red-faced niece and daughter. Being able to marry into a family like the Su family was definitely a rare good marriage for them. She could rest assured. Although the Hua family was quite famous and had a noble family background, everyone knew that after Duke Hua passed away, the Hua family could be considered to have declined. Even if their descendants lived up to expectations, they wouldn't be able to rise again in 10 or 20 years. The Su family didn't have many members. Family background wasn't important. Hua Tianxiang and Mo Huio naturally wouldn't suffer any grievances if they married into the Su family. Hua Tianxiang was fine. She and Su Qingfeng both liked each other. It could be said that they liked each other. However, between Mo Huio and Su Qingbai, it was more Madame Su who played a role. Moreover, Su Qingbai wasn't someone who would suppress his anger like Su Qingfeng. It was difficult to see through his feelings. Mo Huio wasn't very old. Even if she had some feelings for Su Qingbai, she was still muddle-headed when she was set to marry into the two families. It wasn't that she was unwilling. It was just that she was inevitably at a loss and at a loss. Chapter 778. Yili saw Mo Huio's expression but didn't say anything. Su Qingbai definitely had a good impression of Huio. Otherwise, with his gentle but opinionated personality, he wouldn't listen to eldest Madame Su's wishes. When Mo Huio mentioned Su Qingbai, he didn't seem to dislike him. They were both still young and had plenty of time to grind. Princess Consort, Duke Changxing and Princess Shenning request an audience. Qing Shuang came in to report while everyone was chatting. Everyone was stunned. Empress Hua and Mo Huio's expressions were even more complicated. The others only found it strange at most, but the two of them had a deeper relationship with Mo Xiaoyun and Princess Shenning. Murong Ting asked curiously, what are they doing at the Prince Ding mansion at this time? Ever since they moved to Glass City, Mo Xiaoyun and Princess Shenning had lived in seclusion. Other than visiting Yili when they first arrived, they had never set foot in the Prince Ding mansion. It was no wonder that Murong Ting was curious. Yili thought for a moment and said, let them in. Qing Shuang accepted the order and left. Eldest Madame Su asked, Duke Changxing and Princess Shenning are looking for you. Shall we leave first? Yili shook her head and said, they will be living in Glass City for a long time in the future. Don't tell me we won't see each other anymore. They should be here for Noble Consort Lu. Noble Consort Lu. All the womenfolk were shocked. In their opinion, Noble Consort Lu was someone who had passed away a long time ago. Yili nodded and pondered for a moment before saying, Noble Consort Lu isn't dead. She's in Glass City right now. Duke Changxing and Princess Shenning should have gotten the news and came to me for confirmation. Soon, Mo Xiaoyun and Princess Shenning were brought in. Both of their complexions were quite good. It seemed that they were living quite comfortably in Glass City. However, looking at the hideous scar on Princess Shenning's half-drooping face, everyone couldn't help but sigh in their hearts. Greetings to Princess Ding. The two didn't have the arrogance of the princes and princesses of Dechu State. When they saw Yili, they greeted her respectfully. Yili smiled and said, Prince Changxing and Princess Shenning need not be so courteous. Come and have a seat. Have you gotten used to living in Glass City these days? Mo Xiaoyun nodded calmly, thank you for your concern, Princess Consort. My sister and I are fine. Although these words were polite, they were also sincere. Although they were powerless princes and princesses in Glass City, after experiencing all kinds of hardships and pain in the past 2 years, this kind of life was not so difficult. Moreover, the Prince Ding mansion did not mistreat the siblings. Although Mo Xiaoyun was young, he could see it clearly. In this world, other than Glass City in the Prince Ding mansion, there was no place for the two of them. His age and ability were far from enough to establish a strength that could protect him against the various forces in the world. Yi Li nodded. She was very satisfied with Mo Xiaoyun's clear-headedness and understanding of the situation. The two of them thanked Yi Li and sat down on the empty stool at the side. Only then did they see the acquaintances sitting beside them. They couldn't help but be surprised. Imperial Mother. Imperial Sister. Although noble consort Lu and Empress Hua had always been at odds, Mo Xiaoyun and Princess Shen Ning did not have any ill feelings towards Empress Hua. At most, Princess Shen Ning was very jealous of Mo Wuyu. But that jealousy seemed even more meaningless now. Because of noble consort Lu, Mo Wuyu didn't like these two siblings. But he also knew that their days in Glass City in the past 2 years were not much better than his experience in the past. Looking at Princess Shen Ning's face and the way they acted when Chu Jing was besieged. In the end, they were still biological siblings. Mo Wuyu couldn't help but feel a little soft-hearted. He nodded and said, "Are you all well?" Princess Shen Ning's eyes were slightly red. She bit her lip and nodded. She lowered her head in shame. When she knew that Mo Wuyu was sent to Nanzhao King, she had gloated in her heart. Now, seeing that Mo Wuyu didn't show a look of disdain and ridicule because of her disfigured face, and didn't even show the pity she hated the most, she felt a little ashamed in her heart. Imperial Sister, Mo Wuyu smiled and said, "Just call me Wuyu. I'm no longer a princess now." Mo Xiaoyun nodded in understanding. He said to Empress Hua and Mo Wuyu, "Mother, Sister Wuyu." Empress Senhua felt a little strange for her mother, but it was not excessive. Empress Hua was originally Mo Jingqi's wife after all. All the princes and princesses had to call her Imperial Mother. She was the official mother of Mo Xiaoyun and the other princes and princesses. Empress Hua nodded slightly. She looked at Mo Xiaoyun and said lightly, "You have suffered in the past 2 years. Since you have endured it, forget the past. Live well with your sister." Mo Xiaoyun nodded and said, "Thank you for your guidance." Prince Changxing and Princess Shen Ning came to the Prince Ding mansion. "What's the matter?" Yi Li asked. Mo Xiaoyun looked at the many womenfolk in front of him and didn't hide anything. He nodded and said, replying to Princess, "My sister and I heard people say that there is a woman beside the 7th prince of the northern tribes. The description is very similar to Imperial Mother. Is it true?" Yi Li looked at the two people staring at her and sighed softly. She nodded and said, "Yes, the woman beside Yilu Yi is called Qing Yi Na. It is said that she is the fiancée of the 7th prince. Although I haven't seen her real face, according to Princess Ronghua, she is exactly the same as noble consort Lu." If you have any doubts in your heart, you can go to the post house and ask her. Mo Xiaoyun's expression was slightly subservient. He said in a deep voice, "My sister and I went to the post house twice to ask for an audience, but we were rejected. So, we came to see Princess, to ask Princess to check." Yi Li thought for a moment and said, "Qing Yi Na is someone brought by Prince Yelu. She is also a guest. It is not convenient for this consort to send people to check on her. However, you can go and ask Princess Ronghua." Princess Ronghua often went in and out of the palace when she was young. She should be more familiar with that person than this consort. In fact, listening to Yi Li's words, the two of them had basically confirmed noble consort Lu's identity. Not to mention Mo Xiaoyun's gloomy face, Princess Shen Ning's hand that was holding the handkerchief had turned white and was faintly trembling. Yili looked at the two of them and said earnestly, no matter whether that person is noble consort Lu or not, you have to think thrice before you act. You must not act rashly. If you have any difficulties, come to the residence and talk to me and the prince. Although this is Glass City, Yelu Yi is the prince of the northern tribes after all. His power is not small. You must not act rashly. Mo Xiaoyun was silent for a moment and nodded, many thanks for princess's reminder. We understand. We won't disturb princess any longer. My sister and I will take our leave first. Yili nodded lightly and looked at Princess Shenning and said softly, don't stay in the room all day. Come out and walk more. It's not so bad outside. Princess Shenning bit her lip and nodded before hurriedly leaving with Mo Xiaoyun. Seeing the siblings leave, everyone's mood became somewhat gloomy. Hua Tianxiang frowned and said, Princess Shenning's face was really damaged by noble consort Lu. She used to walk around the palace often, but she did not have much of an impression of Princess Shenning. In fact, noble consort Lu's 3 children were not very similar to her. Princess Shenning, as a daughter, was not valued by her own mother. Mo Jingqi also doted on Mo Wuyo, so she did not have much of a presence in the palace. She was completely not like the daughter of a concubine who was crowned the head of the harem. At this time, seeing the scary scars on that originally beautiful face, Hua Tianxiang could not help but sympathize with her. Chapter 779. Yili shook her head and said, no one knows what happened. When we rescued her, noble consort Lu had already disappeared. She was the only one in the cold palace. If we hadn't rescued her in time, I'm afraid everyone would have thought that noble consort Lu was the one who died. In this way, no matter what the truth was, in the eyes of the surviving Princess Shenning, it was her biological mother who threw her into the sea of fire to die. Empress Hua frowned slightly and said, I think Zhenning hates noble consort Lu to the core. Will something happen if they go to her? With Prince Changxing, there should be no problem. Yili frowned and said. Speaking of noble consort Lu, everyone couldn't help feeling disgusted. They naturally knew about noble consort Lu's feelings towards Mo Xiaoyao and how she forced Mo Xiaoyao to marry her. Coupled with Princess Shenning's matter, their disgust towards noble consort Lu went up a level. Murong Ting hugged Ling Junhan and said hatefully, if I meet that kind of woman, I'll whip her directly. Mo Xiaobao, who was sitting next to Yili and eating snacks obediently, blinked and asked, Mother, are you talking about the white-clothed auntie in the Chu capital? Hearing this, Yili looked at Mo Xiaobao with some surprise. You still remember noble consort Lu? Mo Xiaobao pouted unhappily, that auntie was the most annoying. She always looked at me and mother with strange eyes. I wanted to tell father that if she looked again, he would dig her eyes out. Who knew that she would die? So he's not dead yet? Yili's head was throbbing with pain. How could he be so excited? When did she teach him such a cruel idea? At that time, Mo Xiaobao was not even 7 years old. In the northern tribe post house, Princess Ronghua received the news that Prince Changxing and Princess Shenning wanted to see her. A strange smile appeared on her lips. She ordered the attendants beside her to immediately invite the two in. Mo Xiaoyun and Princess Shenning had come twice before, but they were sent away by the posthouse's people. They couldn't even enter the door. This time, he asked to see Princess Ronghua. Sure enough, he was soon taken in. Princess Ronghua specially received the two people in the main hall of the post house. When she saw Mo Xiaoyun and Princess Shenning, she was full of smiles and pulled them to sit down. When I was still in the Chu capital, you were still children. I didn't expect that after not seeing you for so many years, you've already grown up. Looking at the young man and girl in front of her, Princess Ronghua sighed. Although she wasn't old yet, seeing a child grow up into an adult made people sigh with emotion. Is Aunt Ronghua doing well in the northern tribes? Mo Xiaoyun asked. Princess Ronghua smiled and said, "The crown prince treats me very well. Everything is fine. I've heard about what happened in the past few years. It's just that the two of you have suffered." Mo Xiaoyun was no longer a child who didn't know anything. He smiled faintly and said, "Royal sister and I are also very good. The Prince Ding mansion is very good to us." "That's good. Prince Ding is a kind-hearted person." Although they were not as rich and honorable as the princes of the royal family, compared to those who schemed against each other, their days were much more comfortable. "Now that you've finally come out, don't think about those things. Not everyone has the luck to jump out of this circle." Princess Ronghua felt that it was also a piece of advice to the two. Mo Xiaoyun nodded and said, "I understand. Thank you for your advice, Aunt Ronghua." Princess Zhenning looked at Princess Ronghua and hesitated. Princess Ronghua naturally understood why they came. She raised her hand and patted the back of her hand gently, and said softly, "I've heard about what happened to you. Good child, you've suffered. You want to see Qing Yaina, don't you?" Mo Xiaoyun hesitated and nodded. They had heard before that Princess Ronghua was arrogant and domineering. At this time, seeing her so kind, they didn't like it for a while. After all, they were children born in the royal family. No one was pure and innocent. Naturally, they had some doubts about such a kind Princess Ronghua. Princess Ronghua saw through his doubts at a glance. She smiled and said, "Silly child, who can be the same as when they were young? In fact, I'm not sure if she is. I'll ask someone to invite her over. You can meet her. Don't be impulsive." The two nodded silently. After a while, noble consort Lu, dressed in white, came in. Without looking at the hall, she said coldly to Princess Ronghua, "What do you want to say?" These 2 days, noble consort Lu was in a very bad mood. Not only because after meeting Mo Xiuyao and Yili on the street 2 days ago, but also because she was severely reprimanded by Yelu Yi when she returned to the post house. It was also because Mo Xiaoyun and Zhen Ning came to see her yesterday. Before coming, she really didn't think that these two children would be in Glass City. More importantly, she didn't know how to face them, and she didn't want to see them. Princess Ronghua raised her eyebrows and said, "What do I want?" "Someone is looking for you." "Who?" Noble consort Lu's voice was hoarse. She looked at the two teenagers who were looking at her coldly in shock. In the blink of an eye, 2 years had passed. Mo Xiaoyun was much taller than 2 years ago and looked much calmer. Princess Zhenning sat next to Mo Xiaoyun. Her face was also covered with a veil, but her eyes were as cold as ice. Noble consort Lu's heart trembled. "You? Who are you?" After a while, noble consort Lu calmed down and said reluctantly. But how could her shocked eyes and familiar aura be hidden from her own children? Seeing that noble consort Lu didn't intend to recognize them, a trace of pain and resentment flashed in their eyes. Meeting Princess Zhenning's cold eyes, noble consort Lu immediately evaded with a guilty conscience. She turned around and stared at Princess Ronghua. "Crown Princess, what do you mean?" Princess Ronghua drank tea leisurely and said with a faint smile, "What do you mean?" "They are the orphan of my cousin, the Emperor. Prince Changxing and Princess Zhenning are here for you." "Qing Yaina, don't you know them?" "Of course I don't know them." Noble consort Lu said, "Since there's nothing else, I'll go back to my room first." After that, she didn't even look at Mo Xiaoyun and Princess Zhenning and turned to walk inside. Princess Ronghua put down the teacup and said with a smile, "Don't go, Qing Yaina. These two children have worked so hard to find their mother. Their filial piety is commendable. Even if you really don't know them, you should make it clear to them." Noble consort Lu was startled. She looked back at them hurriedly and said, "You've got the wrong person." Mo Xiaoyun and Princess Zhenning were silent. Seeing noble consort Lu turn to leave, Princess Shenning gritted her teeth and said, "Mother, you really don't know us? You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.